When all of humanity got thrown into shard-tide ocean, I woke up on a piece of coral barely wider than a folded blanket, shoes already in the water. Out of every owner on my stretch of sea, mine is the only island the world did not bother to classify. My name is Seo Taegun, a Korean dock worker who knew fish, rope, and bad weather, and not a lot more. Everyone else opened their eyes on giant islands with trees, streams, caves, beaches, huts. Archipelago chat called me coral trash before anyone asked my name. One rule landed before the rest. An island core is a survival anchor. Lose it, you get erased. My first morning reef report pointed at a starter island with fruit, driftwood, shellfish, a freshwater seep, one reef lizard, and a raft blueprint, and I thought it was helping me live one more day. After I conquered it, my coral opened like a mouth. Turns out I had not been handed the weakest island. I had been handed the only one that could eat the others. Water is cold around my ankles, and for a few seconds I do not move, because moving is what someone who knows what is happening does, and I do not know what is happening yet. Underneath me, the coral is rough, pale, dotted with small pink bumps and one knob shaped like a fist. Crouching low, I let my hands work the surface for grip. Sea around me is calm in the way it goes calm right before it stops being calm, and a thin film of sunlight is coming through what should be sky but reads more like a high-painted ceiling. A panel appears in front of my eyes, white-edged neat. Welcome, owner Seo Taegun. Shard-tide ocean migration complete. 8 billion humans transported. 1 island core per owner. Voice on the panel runs the lines, and on the second read it sticks. Island core equals survival anchor. Lose the core, you are erased. My starter kit unpacks itself in a row across the bottom of my vision. 1 stale ration, a small water pouch, weak fishing line, crude hook material, a single island core claim marker. Of course it was the budget kit. I open the panel and tap into the ranking list. Names roll up under an island-size column. Dragging my eye down, I find my row near the bottom, and the cell next to it reads unclassified owner in smaller letters than everyone else's row. Whoever wrote the ranking did not bother to round me up. World chat scrolls pictures while I read. Someone with a beach island posts a freshwater stream cutting through palm shadow. A second handle posts a cave mouth lit by glowworms. Third one posts a grove of fruit trees with a creek through the middle. And the fourth posts a screenshot of the ranking list with my row circled and the caption coral trash. I close the panel because the next post is going to be funnier and I am not in the mood. My stomach is the next thing calling shifts. Half the stale ration goes down dry, then a measured sip from the pouch, then a long sit cross-legged on the coral while the rules get to the part that actually matters. Morning reef report, the next prompt says. 1 daily intel scan. Nothing chosen yet, so the report runs random on an uninhabited starter within range. Text rolls in fragments through the top of my vision. Uninhabited starter island. Distance 200 meters southeast. Low danger. Contents red fruit cluster. Driftwood pile. Shellfish bed. Freshwater seep. 1 reef lizard estimated level 3. Crude shell raft blueprint near a broken crab trap. Best landing point the inner shore. Conquest condition claim core before tide closes the path. Last line of the report flags a warning. Tide closes the inner channel in approximately 5 hours. Shift clock math is easy. 5 hours is not nothing, but 5 hours with no boat is not a lot either. A crude hook material in the starter kit is a chip of coral shaped like a thumbnail. My weak fishing line is the kind of thread you would not trust. Sitting on the edge of my coral, I use the rough underside of the knob to score a notch in the chip, fold the line through, and tie a half hitch with 3 wraps, because my hands have done this before in worse weather. A rod is what I do not have. Reaching past the lip, I break a finger of driftwood off a piece floating against the coral, jam the line through a crack, knot the line to the wood, and let the rig drop into the water. A silver minnow hits the first nibble, and the line is too weak to lift him, so I walk him sideways along the coral edge until I can flip him onto the surface. He flops. Knee pins him. Hands first, knife later. No knife yet. Biting the head off is what dockwork prepared me for, and dockwork prepared me for one thing, which is not squeamishness. Another minnow comes in 5 minutes. Same routine. Something heavier hits the line on the third drop. Rodwood bends almost in half before I let line out, but the thing is hooked through the lip, just below the surface. Sharp shell crab, palm-sized ridged red on top. Claws not big enough to lose a finger to, but big enough to draw blood. Dragging him onto the coral, I pin him with a foot, twist the legs off the way a fish market guy taught me my first month, and crack the body open with the knob. Sweet meat. Half of him goes down slow because the salt is going to dehydrate me and there is 1 water pouch. His shell stays. Cracking the back plate off in 2 pieces gives me a smooth inside curve, and I tie 1/2 across the back of my left hand with a strip of line. Handguard. Not great. Better than nothing. A small ping says the kit's claim marker has activated and is ready to be planted. Checking the sun against the report's tide warning, I stop overthinking. Marker ties to my wrist with the spare line, rod goes into a coral crack so the tide does not steal it, and I slide into the water on my belly. Swimming the 200 meters is slow. Because I am not a swimmer, I am a guy who fell off enough docks to learn how to float. Face stays out. Legs stay slow. Salt in the eyes is what kills focus. Landmark on the starter island is a dead tree leaning at maybe 60 degrees, and that is all I look at. Sand finds my foot before I expected sand. I crawl up onto a strip of pale shore and lie flat for 15 seconds, breathing. A small starter island. Trees in the middle, low. Driftwood pile against the dead tree. Shellfish bed in the wet line along the south curve. Small dark patch under a rock that has to be the freshwater seep. The reef lizard is not where I can see it, which the report said was level 3, and lizards I cannot see are lizards I should respect. Stick that wants to be a spear sits next to the driftwood pile. Dead palm wood, dry, finger thick at the base. Working the tip against a rock until it is sharp enough to enter something soft takes maybe 2 minutes, and I move slow because the report told me about the reef lizard, but not about where it sleeps. Clay marker on my wrist is humming. Planting it in the sand at the center of the shellfish bed, I kick out a circle around it with my heel, and a pale blue ring traces itself along the kicked line. Claim circle active. Resources inside the circle convert to owner inventory at successful core claim. Anything outside the circle does not transfer. I haul wet driftwood, 3 armloads of dry stuff from the pile, 6 fat shellfish from the bed, 2 red fruits from the lower branches of the closest tree, 1 cracked coconut shell that I file mentally as cup, and a long strip of vine that wraps around a stump twice and then some. All of it goes inside the circle. Pulling the last load is when the lizard comes. He comes low, fast, off the side of the dead tree where I had not been looking. And the report's level 3 estimate is generous because he is bigger than my forearm and he runs like he wants my shins. Spear comes up, drops, comes up again, and on a second pass through I stab him in the meat just behind the front leg. He twists, bites my crab shell handguard, and the shell cracks but holds. I drive the spear through harder. After about 10 seconds he goes still, and 10 seconds is a long time to be biting a hand. A kill flag rolls up the side of my vision. Reef lizard, level 3, defeated. Drops, bone teeth, hide, small island core shard. Sitting down beats standing up. Driftwood spear is splintered halfway down the shaft. Tying the bone teeth to the cracked head with line, the rebuild is uglier than the original and probably stronger. Crab shell guard is loose. I retie it tighter. Blood is on my left forearm but not deep, and salt water will close it before sundown. Broken crab trap at the south end is half buried, and the crude shell raft blueprint sits in a small chest under it. Dust the chest, and the lid opens to my hand because I am the only owner active on the island. Blueprint slots into my inventory, and a soft ping marks it for use. Tide is starting to move on the inner channel. Reading the report once more in my head, I pick up the unclaimed island core that has been sitting at the base of the dead tree this whole time, looking like a clouded glass apple. The core is warm. Holding it against my chest the way the prompt tells me to, I get asked the only question that matters. Coral devour core detected. Acquired island core may be processed in 4 ways. Absorb into coral devour core for growth. Link as outer reef territory. Extract island trait into coral storage. Dissolve into coral building material. Choose. Coral devour core. Earlier the welcome script had not mentioned that. Nothing in the welcome script had mentioned anything of the kind. Absorb is the option I pick. That core breaks open against my chest and pours into something behind my sternum. And behind my sternum is not where it goes. It is where I feel it go. Pale blue claim circle in the sand pulses once and the entire starter island starts unmaking. Slow. Driftwood pile collapses into my inventory. Shellfish in the circle slide into my inventory. Fruit, vine, cracked coconut. The bone teeth I already had. The hide. All of it logs. Lizard's body is outside the circle, and his body dissolves into pale grit and sinks. Trees outside the circle bend, soften and powder into the water like wet sugar. My footing fails because the ground I am standing on is dissolving, so I swim. The 200 meters back is faster because the tide moves with me, and when I drag myself onto the coral platform, I lie there for a full minute before looking at what is left of home. Bigger. Not a lot bigger. Flat surface that was the size of a folded blanket is now the size of a small kitchen floor, and along one edge a shallow depression has filled with seawater. 3 small silver fish already swimming circles in it. Lip of the platform has grown a row of stubby coral teeth angled outward like a low fence. Tiny coral platform, the readout says, evolved to coral ring. Small flat surface. Shallow fish pool. Coral teeth to fence edge. 20 minutes ago I was sitting on a piece of rock the size of a chair cushion. Now I have floor. Chat is the next stop. On the first check, a fresh wave of jokes about coral trash is rolling because someone screenshotted my old ranking row before the swim. 15 minutes later, on the second check, jokes have gone quiet because the island size ranking refreshed, and my row moved up about 30 places. And nobody is saying coral trash anymore. They are asking how. I do not answer. Panel closes. A crude shell raft blueprint glows soft in my inventory. Build it tonight if I sleep less. Before lying down, I open the basic sea map and select the next target. 2 pings sit within range. One is unowned, marked Blood Crab Island, medium low danger. Other is owned and the report icon over it is gray, because owned islands cost more intel and I do not have it. Blood Crab is fine. Target locked, so tomorrow's report scans it. Sun is going. Coral teeth around the edge of the ring throw little pointed shadows across the new floor. Eating the second fruit, I drink another measured sip and lie down on the dry side of the platform with the spear at my hand. Last thing before sleep is to thumb open the inventory and look at the bottom row, where a new line has been added. Coral Devour Core. Active. Capacity growing. Special skill none yet. Durability field on the raft blueprint reads once for confirmation. Capacity field on the Devour Core reads twice. Then sleep. Up before the sun. My weak starter line will not fish a bigger species, but the shallow fish pool on the new edge of the coral has 3 small silver swimming circles in it, and small silvers are bait. Scooping them with the crab shell guard, I drop them in the cracked coconut shell with a finger of seawater, and set the shell where it will not tip. Crude shell raft blueprint opens to a materials list when I focus on it. 6 pieces of driftwood, 2 strips of crab shell, 4 lengths of vine, 1 full waterproof layer of seal moss or equivalent. Yesterday's haul has the driftwood. Crab shells are in there too. Vine is short by maybe 2 arm lengths, but the inside of yesterday's reef lizard hide is the kind of grease that should hold short water. So the hide gets cut, stretched, pinned under the driftwood pile while I lash the frame. Frame is a flat rectangle, hip width and shoulder length, with 2 cross braces. Lashing it the right way is what dock work taught me. Rope wraps go over and under in a figure 8, then the loop locks over itself, and the joint stops moving even when the wood wants to. All 4 corners go through the same way. Hide gets laid across the bottom, lashed down with the last of the vine, and the second crab shell piece is stretched along the bow to give it something close to a point. Panel rolls the new gear up the side of my vision. Crude shell raft. Completed. Carrying capacity 80 kilograms. Speed. Walking pace at calm water. Durability. 30. Special skill. None. Reading the durability number once, I figure I will need to repair it before the second crossing. Raft slides along the edge of the coral ring, weighted down with a heavy lump of dead coral so the tide does not move it. Spear is splintered, but the reef lizard's bone teeth I lashed to the head are still solid, and I rebind them tighter with fresh line, then bind a second tooth in along the side as a kind of barb. A working life got rebuilt with worse tools than this, in worse weather. Morning reef report runs at sunrise. Panel rolls intel down the inside of my vision in clean fragments because Blood Crab Island got locked last night. Blood Crab Island, distance 400 meters south of the Tide Rock, give or take 50. Unowned, danger low to medium, monster-type blood crab estimated level 4 to 5. Count 3 or 4, behavior aggressive when fruit juice touches seawater. Contents red fruit cluster, hardwood roots, crab shell field, freshwater moss patch on the north slope, hidden chest under dead palm roots near the dry side inner curve. Freshwater coral basin blueprint inside the chest. Island trait red shell defense. Best landing point inner shore north side, away from the south sandbar. Conquest condition claim core after clearing crabs. Warning, if fruit juice drips into the surf, crabs swarm. Warning gets read twice. Plan writes itself in my head while I tie off the last knot on the raft. Land north, away from the fruit. Gather red fruit with a dry cloth bag. No drops. Bait fish from a tide pool, use it to draw 1 crab away at a time. Kill them in single file. Move slow. Find the chest before the 3rd crab gets curious. Repair the spear if it breaks. Before pushing off, I open the island market for the first time. Market opens on the inside of my eyelids. Listing scroll, cheap rope, cheap wood, dried meat, fresh fish, basic knives, salt, cloth, bait, water filters, charcoal. Prices in island coins. Bundled rate sits next to most categories. Pulling 6 small shellfish from yesterday's haul out of inventory, I set them as a bundle. Click the auto list option at the suggested rate, and within a count of 40 a buyer with the handle Tide Channel 7 scoops the bundle. Island coins land in my balance. Cash on hand is the difference between getting rated and not, so nothing gets spent yet. 3 minor handles in chat are still asking how a coral owner moved up the ranking yesterday. Scrolling past them is the answer they get. Shell raft holds my weight when I set my knee on it. Push off with the spear, lay flat, paddle with one hand. 400 meters south is slow, and coral teeth on the edge of my ring fade behind me, low and pale. Blood Crab Island reads bigger than the starter island from the water. Shore is dark sand on the north curve, lighter on the south, and the south sandbar is bristled with red-tinged shells half buried in the wet line. 1 crab is already in view, slow, near the south sandbar claws up. He is the size of a dinner plate and he is looking at the water like the water owes him something. I land north. Inner shore is shallow enough to wade through the last 10 meters. Raft gets beached. Wade with 2 heavy stones, clay marker planted on dry sand, and the circle kicked wide, wider than yesterday's, because the report told me where everything is, and I want everything inside it. Red fruit clusters at the foot of a hardwood whose roots are exposed and curling. Carefully, none of them touching, I pick the cluster into a fold of the lizard hide that I have repurposed as a bag. None break. Nothing drips. A tide pool on the north shore has 3 small silver fish, and I scoop them with the crab shell guard, and 1 goes into the coconut bait cup while 2 go onto a flat rock where a crab will see them. Dragging the rock toward the inner edge of the shell field, I crouch low behind a curved root. First crab finds the fish in about 3 minutes. He scuttles, slow claws raised, and stops over the rock with his head down to crack one of the silvers. Behind him is where I am. Spear plants in the joint between his back plate and his second leg. Hard, and his body lifts off the sand. He twists, claw out, but the spear is in deep, and the second strike with my left hand against the spear butt drives it through. Then he stops. 1. Dragging him off into the claim circle, I harvest him quick, fold the shell, set the meat into inventory. Second crab is already moving along the wet line because crabs notice missing crabs. Bait him sideways with the second silver and a tossed pebble, and he turns away from the shore, and I take him through the joint the same way the first one went. 2. Heat on my forehead, breath short. Third crab comes around the south sandbar at speed, fast, not curious. Angry. Fruit juice did not drip. Dead crab smell did. I had not thought of that. A step back. Plant the left foot. Lunge. Spear goes in. Shaft cracks halfway. Crab bucks, drags the spear shaft sideways, and the bone-toothed head snaps off and stays in his joint while the rest of the spear ends up in my hand without a head. He is alive. Slowed. Bleeding, mad, and he turns toward me, and I have a foot of broken stick. Of course the spear broke. They always do on the third one. So I run. Inside the claim circle, along the inner curve, toward the rocks where the report flagged the tide warning. He follows because crabs do not give up when they are bleeding. 2 black rocks the report flagged sit 1.5 meters apart in a low spot where the surf comes in faster than it goes out. I jump the gap. Crab follows the gap. Surf pushes him sideways between the rocks. His back plate catches and he wedges. He cannot turn. Climbing back over the dry side, I find a fist-sized stone and bring it down on the joint behind his eye until he stops moving. 3. Kill flag goes up. Blood crab. Level 4. Defeated. 3. Drops. Blood crab meat. Blood crab shell. Blood crab core fragments. Fragments hum the way the small core shard hummed yesterday. Hidden chest is where the report said it was, half buried under the dead palm roots near the dry side inner curve. Levering the roots up with the broken spear, I pry the chest free, and the lid gives because I am the only owner active on the island. Inside, the freshwater coral basin blueprint sits on top of a smaller cloudy fragment. Pearl hook fragment, the loot tag labels it. Quality low, but real pearl. Both go into inventory. Freshwater moss patch on the north slope is thick. Peeling off a square the size of a placemat, I fold it into the lizard hide bag, and let the water it carries drip back into the seep so nothing wastes. My hand goes on the unclaimed island core where it sits in the hollow of the largest hardwood root. 4-choice prompt comes back up. Absorb. That core breaks against my palm. Claim circle pulses pale blue. Everything inside the circle slides into inventory, including the red fruit cluster I never touched, the hardwood roots I was planning to leave, the crab shells stacked in the corner, the moss bag, trees outside the circle bend and powder, black rocks soften into wet shapes that the surf takes. Whole island is unmaking, slow. Shell raft goes into the water before the inner channel closes, and I lie flat and I paddle. The 400 meters back is harder than the 200, because the wind has shifted and the raft sits lower with a passenger now. Durability counter on the raft ticks down twice. Landing on the coral ring, I beach the raft, weight it with the same stones, and turn around to watch my coral. Ring is unmaking too. Not unmaking, evolving. Shallow fish pool is deepening and widening. A second basin is opening near the south curve, and the water that fills it is not seawater. Cup a handful and it tastes like the freshwater seep from the starter island, only colder and cleaner. Red shells line the new edge in a low ring-tagged red shell defense. Coral teeth on the outer lip have doubled in number. Flat surface is now the size of a small bedroom. Coral ring the upgrade tag reads, evolved to reef camp. Freshwater coral basin operational. Fish pool expanded. Red shell defense ring active. Storage capacity increased. I sit down on the new floor. For the first time since I woke up here, the math is not against me. Blood crab meat goes into the island market before it starts to turn. 5 kilograms at the bundled rate, and the listing snaps up inside 30 seconds, because crab meat is not common at this stage and the buyers are owners with food anxiety. A smaller batch of moss water gets priced at a luxury rate just to see if anyone bites, and someone in a higher island size bracket pays a 50% premium for the bundle and asks in the order notes how I have fresh water this early. No answer goes back. Handle name is on the order, and the handle name is not one I want to know yet. A second handle shows up in market traffic near my zone, and he gets noticed because his orders are eating up cheap rope and cheap wood at twice the bundle rate. He buys out every cheap rope listing within my zone. Cheap wood goes the same way. Rusty knives, gone. Basic axes overpaid for. Handle reads Masyok Jin, basalt owner, and a small dot next to his row marks his island in the regional top. I do not buy anything until his sweep is finished, because going in during his window would tag me on his side of the market, and tagged is not what I want. When his sweep ends, I buy a coil of better rope, a rusty knife with the bundled edge upgrade, 2 squares of cloth, and a small fishing net. Island coins go down. Tools land in inventory. Market closes. Chat is talking about Ma Seokjin's sweep when I look at it, scrolling fast. Most handles are guessing what a basalt owner wants with cheap rope. A handful are joking that he is stockpiling for a slave dock fleet. Other handles are noting that he already has a slave dock fleet, and the rope is for it. Someone posts a low-resolution shot of a chain of boats with what looks like core branding hooks mounted on each prow, and the chat goes quiet for a half-minute because the photo is older than today. Conversation moves on. I do not. Panel stays open in the corner of my vision while I turn back to the camp. Freshwater basin needs a cover. I cut a square of crab shell flat, with the rusty knife's bundled edge, shape it into a rough lid, lay it across the basin, and weight it with stones. Fish pool gets a small grit and shell filter on the seaward side, because dirty pool kills fish in a day. Raft goes up onto the dry side and I check the hull. 3 cracks, none deep. I tar them with crab fat heated on a small driftwood fire under the cover of the dead tree branches I dragged in yesterday. Cooked is what keeps a worker working. Chat pings under a DM thread. Direct message the prompt reads. Sender, Ma Seokjin, basalt owner. My hand stops over the rusty knife, so I open it. Message is short. He writes that he has noticed me. A coral owner with this much market liquidity at this stage, he writes, is a problem the system is still trying to classify it for me. Then he writes that he is willing to leave my coral alone if I send him a list of every resource I have moved through the market in the last 2 days. This, he calls a generous offer. I close the message without answering. That is going to be a problem. Sleep can wait. Sky is going purple, and the sea around the ring is starting to settle the way it settles before night. And I do not lock tomorrow's target yet because I want to see what shows up on the basic sea map first. Basic sea map updates as the light fades. 2 new silhouettes resolve in the half-range circle. First is a small uninhabited shoal island east of me, blank icon, fishing zone shading. Second is a small owned island northeast of me, owner icon yellow because the owner is alive, and the icon is flickering, which the legend tells me means combat is active. Yellow flickering. Combat active on an owned island. Legend has a second line in smaller letters. If owner core breaks while flickering, owner is erased and the island reverts to uninhabited within 1 tide cycle. I lock the owned silhouette for tomorrow's morning reef report. Map closes. Lying down on the dry side of the platform with a rusty knife at my hand and the raft beached behind me, and the second basin filled with cold, clean water, and the red shell ring catching the last purple light. Sleep takes a while. Cheaper and easier is the dock instinct, which says go with the unowned shoal. Flickering is the human instinct. Tomorrow morning, the report will spend itself either way. Sleep takes me eventually. Morning reef report runs before I am fully awake. Panel is already scrolling when I sit up. Owned island, distance roughly 600 meters northeast. Owner handle Han Soye, Fisher class. Island type Silverfish Shoal. Island trait Silverfish Shoal. Contents fish traps along the east shore. Bait hut interior side. Drying rack covered freshwater barrel 1/3 full. Structures damaged. Combatants on island, owner Han Soye, plus 3 hostile boarders identifying as raid skiff under Ma Seokjin basalt owner registration. A 4th hostile is on the raid skiff in shallow approach with core branding hook. Owner core status, cracked. Conquest condition, claim owner core before raid party brands the core. Best landing point, the east traps where the raiders' backs face the sea. Warning, if the core is branded, owner Han Soye is erased and island reverts under Ma Seokjin's flag within 1 tide cycle. That warning gets read 3 times. Dock instinct says skip. Shoal is closer. Shoal is unowned. Shoal does not have 4 armed men on it, and the shoal will still be there in a week. Dock instinct is wrong. I get up. Raft slides off the lip with 1 push. Flat on my belly, I paddle hard. The 600 meters takes longer than the 400 yesterday because wind is against me, and the raft's durability counter ticks down 3 more times on the crossing. And by the time the east traps come into view through the spray I am breathing through my teeth. Fight is visible before it is audible. A woman in a wet brown jacket is on the shallow shelf near the traps, holding a fishing spear 2-handed, swinging. 3 men are on the sand in a loose curve around her, and a 4th is standing in the prow of a long, flat skiff anchored 5 meters out in the shallows. Skiff man is holding a metal hook on a chain that I have only seen in photos. Core branding hook. Soye is fast. That is the first thing to read. Fishing spear is longer than what the boarders are carrying, and she is using the reach. 1 boarder comes in low, catches a thrust on his forearm, and steps back swearing. Another comes in higher, gets a heel kick to the gut, and falls into the shallows. 3rd has cut one of her drying lines and is standing on it because he knows the line matters to her. 4th, on the skiff, is calling something out, an order, and the chain in his hand is swinging slow. Beaching the raft 15 meters off, I slide into the water and come up behind the dry side curve, where the boarders' backs face the sea. A win by being a dock worker is what I have. Out of the lizard hide bag come the blood crab shells from yesterday's haul, the broken plates, the ridged sharp edges. I scatter them in a loose half moon along the wet sand inside the angle of the boarder's likely retreat path. One of them is going to step on those barefoot or with thin sole, and the report flagged the raid skiff as low-grade equipment. Skiff's anchor line runs from the prow back into a coil tied off on a stake driven into the wet sand. Stake is at the edge of the boarder's attention. Crawling low, I cut the line with the rusty knife. The bundled edge takes the rope in 3 strokes. Line falls. Skiff starts to drift. A second after the line falls, the skiff man sees it go slack. He shouts. Dropping the chain, he grabs the prow rail. Skiff is broadside to the surf now, and the surf is taking it sideways. Out of inventory comes the coconut bait cup, the one with the silver minnows and seawater, and I throw it hard into the deeper water past the boarders. 2 reef fish that had been holding off in the shallows because the noise had spooked them turn and shoot toward the splash, and they pull a small cloud of other reef fish behind them, and the water in front of the boarders becomes a flickering panic of silver. First boarder steps backward on instinct. His heel finds a blood crab shell, and he howls and goes down. Soye sees what is happening before any of them do. Later, she told me she had been counting how many minutes she had left, and the answer she had was 0, and that the moment she saw the rope go slack, she stopped counting and started killing. She runs the second boarder with the long spear, full extension, and his weight is already wrong from watching the skiff. Point goes in under his ribs. He folds. The third tries to step over the first one, and his foot finds a second crab shell, and Soye is across the sand and on him before he can right himself, and the spear butt takes him on the side of the skull, hard, and he goes loose. Skiff man has cut his losses. Climbing the bow of the drifting skiff, he throws the chain into the bottom and tries to grab his paddle. Skiff is 20 meters out now and going. He does not look back. First boarder is rolling on the wet sand, hand pressed to the bottom of his foot. Soye plants the spear point an inch from his throat and tells him in a voice steadier than mine would have been at that moment that if he wants to leave with his face, he will roll into the surf and start swimming. He rolls. Then he swims. Skiff drags out of range slow, because the wind is against the skiff too. Dry side curve is quiet again. Soye turns to me. Fishing spear is still up. Her left hand is bleeding from a cut along the knuckle. Wet hair sticks to her jaw, and her eyes are doing a fast read of me, head to feet, the way a person who has just survived a fight reads anyone new who shows up after the fight is over. I told her my handle and my island size and the fact that I was the one who cut the anchor line. She told me her name was Han Soye, that the raiders had hit her at dawn, that she had been holding them for nearly half an hour, and that her core was cracked. That last part I had not said anything about yet. The panel had said it. She knew the system had said it. I asked how long it had been cracked. About 10 minutes, she said. The skiff man had grazed her core with the branding hook on his second approach, she added, and missed the brand by a hand's width, but cracked the casing. Then she said her count was running. I asked what the count read. She said 4 minutes. A check of the morning reef report's mirror on the side of my vision put the count at 3:40. There was no time to argue with myself about this. Panel pinged. Owner Han Soye core cracked. 4 minutes to collapse. If core collapses, owner erased. Available actions for nearby owner Seo Taegun. Claim owner core under conquest interface. Owner Han Soye erased on absorption. Bind core under coral devour core authority. Owner Han Soye survives as core bound under your island system. Decline action. Owner Han Soye erased on collapse. A third option that ends with her free and alive on her own island is not what the system is offering. What it offers is erased or bound. I know this. Chat had been talking about this for 2 days. There is no free vassal route, just bind or break. I told Soye what the panel said. She read it from her side of the system, because she had access to her own reading of it. Reading it through, her face did one of the few things a face does when it is being told that the only door left open is the one nobody wants to walk through. Her jaw did not set. Shoulders did not drop either. She looked at me, and she looked at the broken drying rack behind me, and she said the word slave in a flat voice, the way a person says a word in a language they have not chosen. I told her she would not be a slave the way Seokjin's people were slaves. She would have a role on my coral. I said, eat what I ate, sleep in shelter, handle fish because she was a fisher and I was not. And the survival bond was a bond the system enforced, not me. The panel, I told her, did not give me the option to free her. Without the bind, she would be erased in 3 minutes. She told me she understood. It did not come out kindly, nor did it come out like a person who was choosing. What she said it like was a person who had run out of choices and was being honest about it. I told her I was going to bind. She told me to do it before the count ran out. Hand pressed against her sternum where the bind prompt told me to. I waited for the confirmation prompt. Confirmed. And the bind went through. There was no flash. No light either. Update rolled slow. Core bound. Owner Seo Taegun. Bound survivor Han Soye. Silverfish Shoal trait extracted. Fisher class linked. Damaged Silverfish Shoal Island linked as outer reef territory under coral ring system anchor. Soye sat down on the wet sand and put her forehead against her knees for a count of 6. Nothing got said during the 6. Lifting her head, She told me in the same flat voice that her drying rack was still where it had been, that her fish traps had been cut, and that we needed to move both before the tide went out, because the tide going out on this stretch took the fish with it. The traps could be repaired in an hour with the rope I had bought, she said. By sunset, with a flat surface and salt, she could turn the day's catch into dried food packs. About the bind, she would not talk again until tomorrow. I told her that was fair. We worked. Silverfish shoal trait felt different in my coral system than the red shell defense had. Shape of the coral did not change the way the basin had changed it. Something opened. Fish pool on the new edge of the reef camp deepened, and a second pool opened next to it, longer, narrower, and the silverfish from her island started arriving in the new pool in a thin stream that ran along the bound link drawn across the sea between her shoal and my ring. Her damaged island sat as an outer reef under my anchor now, an attached territory smaller than it had been because the raid damage was real but functional. Soye and I crossed back to the reef camp on the shell raft. 2 trips because the raft would not carry both of us with cargo. First trip was her with the dried food gear. Second was me with the salt and the freshwater bag and the rebuilt drying lines. By the time the sun was at half height, the new pool was holding a respectable 30 fish. The drying rack was raised on a small frame on the dry side of the camp, and Soye had her hands in salt and silver scales and was working. 10 kilograms of fresh silver fish go onto the market at the bundle rate. Buyers are quick. The rest does not get listed. Everything left goes into Soye's drying rack, because Soye is right that food on the rack is a hedge against bad weather and bad neighbors. First message hits while I am setting the second tray on the drying rack. Direct message. The prompt reads, Sender, Ma Seokjin, basalt owner. So I read it without sitting down. Seokjin writes that the raid skiff that had failed to brand a fishing island this morning had come back without one boarder, and with a story about a coral owner who cut a rope. The coral owner, he writes, is apparently me. One chance, he writes next, to send the bound fisher and the silverfish shoal trade extraction back to him in full, with an apology, and in exchange he will call off the second skiff that is being readied at his dock. If I do not hand her over by sunset, he closes, the second skiff will not be a skiff. No reply goes back. Sun is going down. Coral teeth around the edge of the reef camp are catching the low light and throwing little pointed shadows across the new floor. Soye is on the outer reef, kneeling by the longer pool, watching the silverfish come in through the link. Her hand is on the lip of the pool, and the lip of the pool is mine, and the silverfish are coming through under my anchor, and the system has put her under my reading, and the sun is going. DM thread pings again. Ma Seokjin's name. A second message. Reading the first message through one more time, top to bottom, I let the second one wait. The numbers run in my head, slow. My eye goes to Soye. After that, to the new pool. From the pool to the raft. Past the raft to the freshwater basin under its crab shell lid. Last, to the coral teeth catching the last of the light. So I open the second message. Reading the first message a third time gives me the shape of what Seokjin has been doing all afternoon, which is buying out my margins. Rope sweep, wood sweep, knife sweep, public DM about market liquidity to plant the word liquidity in chat where 100 handles can repeat it for him. Asking me for a list of every resource I had moved over 2 days is asking me for the shape of my coral without paying for a deep report. Cheap intel. Generous the way a buyer is generous when he wants the rope thrown in. Of course he wants a list. Soye looks up from the long pool when the second prompt rings on her side of the system. Her reading of any message addressed to me runs across the bind link now, and the link runs cold the way a wet rope runs cold against bare skin. She sees the sender field. Her jaw shifts a quarter inch. A check of the open market window before I read the second message tells me where the wider water is. Chat is no longer joking about Seokjin's rope sweep. 2 handles in the regional bracket above mine are asking publicly whether anyone has seen a coral owner take a silverfish shoal trait in one morning. And a third handle answers in the same thread that one of Seokjin's skiff crews limped back to the basalt docks, without a boarder and with a story about cut rope. A fourth handle, smaller, posts a side-by-side of my old island size row and my new island size row. Comments under the side-by-side go fast. Coral trash, one says, before someone replies that whatever the coral is now, trash is not the word for it. Tide Channel 7, the buyer who took my first shellfish bundle, posts a single line asking if I am selling crab meat in bulk and at what bundle break. No answer goes back yet. I open the market section. A quick listing goes up. 5 kilograms of dried silver fish, half of the rack's first tray, at the bundled rate with a small premium because dried is rarer than fresh. Tide Channel 7 scoops the bundle in seconds and adds a tip on top in the notes, which I read as a handshake offer. 2 more handles in adjacent zones queue for the next batch. Soye sees the orders post through the link, and the line of her shoulders drops a finger's width because food sold under cover is food the next raid cannot find. A panel rolls down the inside of my vision before I open the second message, because the system is pacing itself to me now in a way it was not pacing yesterday. Coral Devour Core, Capacity Update, Absorbed Cores, 2, Linked Outer Territories, 1, Bound owners. 1. Extracted island traits. 3. Red shell defense, freshwater coral basin, silverfish shoal, devour rate, slow steady, stability green, special skill unlocking, trait extraction queue, capacity 2 of 3. 2 slots open. 1 slot reserved against accidental overflow. A trait I do not need today goes into the queue tomorrow without destabilizing the coral. The system is starting to behave. That counter is going to matter sooner than I want. Soye is already on the far side of the long pool with her sleeves rolled, pinching scales off the third tray's worth of silvers. She works the way a person works when work is the part of the day she has chosen to keep. The silverfish shoal trait, as a number on my panel, reads as a 30% boost to fish pool stocking under linked territory conditions, with a secondary bait quality bonus. As a thing in my coral, it reads as a thin, steady arrival of small silver bodies along the bind line, which is not a number, which is something the panel does not have a column for. The bind link itself I had not understood until I felt it run cold under the second DM. Sitting cross-legged on the dry side of the camp, I pull up the core-bound section of the system menu for the first time, because reading the contract before signing it is something I did not get to do. Owner CO Taegun. Bound survivors 1. Han Soye, Fisher class, Silverfish Shoal trait extracted. Linked outer territories Silverfish Shoal damaged island. Survival anchor under Coral Devour core. Daily upkeep 15% of coral energy per bound survivor at current scale. Upkeep adjusts with coral growth. Bond visibility, all sensory feedback runs both ways under active threat conditions. Severability of bond. No clean release available under current system rules. Bound survivor erased on owner death within 1 tide cycle. 15%. One survivor takes 15% of the coral's energy every day, off the top, before I do anything else. Whatever I had planned to spend coral energy on, today, tomorrow, and the day after, is 15% thinner now. The freshwater basin draws coral energy. A fish pool draws coral energy. Any deep report draws coral energy. That crab shell lid that hums when I cover the basin draws too. 15% of all of it goes to keep Soye alive because the only door the system left open had her name on it. Then I read the last 2 lines again. Bond severability, no clean release. Erased on owner death within 1 tide cycle. She lives if I live. I live if I do not get sloppy. Sloppy is what Sokjin is hoping for. A small part of me, the part that worked night shifts with men who smelled like fish and bad luck, takes that translation and pockets it. Honest work. The math is honest too. Nothing to feel good about. Twilight sits low on the basin lid now. Sky out past the coral teeth is going copper at the rim, and the kind of dark blue under it that you only see over open water. Tide on the inner channel is coming back, slow, and the surf where the long pool meets the seaward edge is making the soft hiss that sand makes when it lets a wave go. 2 small silverfish jump in the new pool because something under the surface scared them, and the something is the trait, working. Soye does not look up. The third tray fills. Around the dry side of the camp, the coral teeth are catching the copper and throwing little pointed shadows across the surface, and 1 shadow lands on the back of my hand. I move the hand. Shadow moves with it. The basic sea map opens for a check. Owned silhouette where Soye Shoal used to be now reads under my flag, smaller than it was. Linked. Unowned shoal east of me is still pinging. 2 more pings have resolved in the half-range circle since this morning. 3rd silhouette northwest. Faint, unowned, no shading. 4th silhouette due north. Larger, owned, icon steady yellow, not flickering. A 5th silhouette has appeared at the edge of the half-range circle, and the icon is darker than the others. More weight to it. The kind of dot a basalt-class island shows up is when the map is not zoomed close enough to render the shipwreck docks along its coast. The 5th dot's weight reads as it reads. Map closes. Of course he is closer than he was yesterday. I open the status section and count. Coral teeth doubled, holding. Freshwater basin full, lid sealed. Long pool stocking. Drying rack 2 trays curing, 1 tray loaded. Raft beached, 3 cracks tarred, durability holding at 20. Rusty knife with bundled edge, sharp. Spear, broken halfway, rebuilt with 2 bone teeth, holding. Hide bag, light. Bait coconut refilled, claim marker expended. Island coins on hand, modest, growing. Soy 1, fed, working bound, cold. Twilight runs the reef floor a deeper copper as the surf pulls back. Pale grit shows in the trough where the sand falls away into the coral shelf, and along the trough small pink polyps are opening for the night. 2 reef shrimp move along a coral finger near my heel. Slow, transparent, antennae checking for the next thing to push past them. A flatfish the size of my palm slides through the gap between the long pool's seaward edge and the open water. Going in, not out. The trait, again, working. A reef that knows where to send dinner is a reef that pays for itself. I keep my hand off the second DM for 1 more breath. Then I open it. Cinder, Masokjin, Basalt owner. 2 attachments load before the body of the message. First attachment is a single still image. Long black hull, basalt gray deck, monster bone ribs braced along the top sides. 6 oars per side stacked into rigid frames. prow shaped into a chained ram beak with a core branding hook the size of my torso mounted on a swivel above it. Tag along the lower edge of the image reads, Basalt Warskiff 9, Masokjen Basalt Owner, Deployment Ready. Underneath the tag is a smaller line, Crew Complement 12, 2 core-bound boarders, 10 free fighters, armament monsterbone rams, hull crusher hooks, 2 slave dock branding chains. Estimated range from your coral 3 hours under sail. Second attachment is a route plot. Thin red line draws itself from a dot on the larger basalt silhouette northwest of me, runs southeast across open water, bends once around a coral shelf that is not mine, and terminates on the icon that the map has been calling my reef camp since yesterday. Time to arrival count along the line reads as 7 hours, 22 minutes, declining. Below the attachments, the message body reads short and clean. Seokjin writes that the first skiff failed because the first skiff was a courtesy. The second hull will not be a skiff. Basalt War Skiff 9 departs the basalt docks at the next tide change. He writes, with 12 aboard and orders to brand the silverfish shoal trait directly out of the bound fisher's anchor while she stands on my coral. The branding will not erase her, he writes helpfully. It will transfer her bond to his flag, leave my coral intact for him to absorb at leisure, and leave me alive long enough to write him an apology. A counteroffer, he writes, is still available until first tide change. The counteroffer is the same as before. He wants the bound fisher and the trait, voluntarily handed, plus a manifest of every resource I have moved for the market in the last 2 days. In exchange, he will recall Warskiff 9 and call my coral protected territory under basalt owner courtesy, which he assures me has commercial value. Last paragraph of the message is shorter. He writes that a third party has expressed interest in my coral. The third party, he writes, is a subordinate of his named Park Gunte, a mangrove knife island owner with a personal grudge against unranked coral owners, that he has not bothered to explain. Park Gunte, he writes, is currently moored beside Basalt Dock 3 with 2 core-bound fighters of his own, and has volunteered to escort Warskiff 9 at no charge. The next tide change, Seokjin closes, is in 7 hours and 22 minutes. Then a small line under the message, in the system's own gray, not Seokjin's. Direct message read receipt sent to Ma Seokjin, Basalt owner. Reply window open. I close the panel without typing. Soye has stopped working. Her hands are still on the third tray, but her hands are not moving, and the cold in the bind link has gone a degree colder, and she is reading the message through me whether either of us wanted that or not. She does not turn around. The line of her shoulders is back where it was this morning when the spear was in her hands and the count was running. A quiet pass of my eye runs from her shoulders to the basin lid, to the long pool to the coral teeth, to the beached raft, to the broken spear, to the darker dot on the closed map I cannot see anymore. 12 aboard. 2 core bound, 10 free. Monster bone rams, 2 branding chains. 7 hours, 22 minutes. Plus a mangrove knife owner with 2 core bound fighters of his own, riding along for free, with a grudge he has not explained. Of course it would be 12, plus 3. They always send 3 more than you can count. I open inventory. Coil of better rope, 1. Rusty knife with bundled edge, 1. 2 squares of cloth. Small fishing net, 1. Pearl hook fragment, 1. Bone teeth, 4. Hide strips, several. Red shells, many. Driftwood, much. Vines, several lengths. Island coins, modest. Crude shell raft blueprint, used. Freshwater coral basin blueprint, installed. Bone sailboat blueprint, none yet. Coral wall bastion blueprint, none yet. Trade extraction queue, 2 slots open. Coral devour core, capacity reads at 38% under current upkeep. The math is a problem. So a draft of how the math has to change starts running in the back of my head while I stand up. Anchor points along the seaward edge can take red shell traps below the tide line and a row of bone teeth set into the coral lip, which the teeth can take because the teeth are mine. Long pool can be turned from a stocking pool into a bait pool with 1 shifted gate. A second drying rack can be raised on the dry side to hold the night's catch off the sand, so a skiff that boards through the surf does not sweep it away. The freshwater basin needs a second lid and a stone weight, because a branding chain swung wide will hit the lid first. Soye's fishing spear, longer than mine, goes by the seaward edge where the reach matters. My broken spear with the bone teeth rebuild stays at hand for the close work. 7 hours 22 is not 5 hours. 5 hours yesterday was tight. 7 and change tonight is honest if I do not sleep. Soye is already turning. She tells me in the same flat voice she used this morning that she has counted 3 things and would like to say them once. The drying rack can move in 20 minutes. A bait gate can shift in 10. She can teach the fish to read the new gate inside an hour because the trait is hers, and she knows how the trait reads. After that, she says, she will repair traps and braid line and weight the basin lid until the basalt hull is on the half-range circle. Then she will hold the seaward edge with her own spear until the count runs out. I tell her, indirect through the bind, because that is how it has to go now, that 20 plus 10 plus 60 is 90 minutes, and 90 minutes inside 7 hours 22 is workable, and the rest of the time is mine to spend on traps and intel. She does not say anything kind in return. A nod is what I get. Last act before the long night starts is to open the morning reef report's overnight selector and switch tomorrow's scan target. The unowned shoal east of me drops off the queue. Default selection clears. Threat priority option appears at the top of the list because the map has flagged Warskiff 9 and Park Guntae as inbound under Basalt owner registration. Locking the threat priority option, I confirm. Panel acknowledges. Tomorrow's report will scan the Warskiff and the mangrove knife escort instead of an island. Defensive use of the report, the system tag reads. One free intel scan on Basalt Warskiff 9 and Park Guntae's escort vessel at sunrise. Tomorrow's island scan. Forfeit. That tag I do not need to read twice. Sky is full dark now. Coral teeth catch the first stars and throw them across the long pool in small bright pieces that move when the surf moves. Soye is at the bait gate already, shifting a slat with her foot, watching the silvers respond. A second drying rack stands half raised on the dry side under my hands, and the basin lid takes its second weight, and the broken spear is in my belt with the 2 bone teeth wrapped tight. I do not flinch on a tight job. Work faster instead. Behind my sternum, the coral devour core hums a little louder than yesterday. 7 hours, 22 minutes, then 6. 6 hours becomes 5, and then it becomes the kind of count that stops feeling like time and starts feeling like work I am already behind on. Soye holds the seaward edge with her longer spear, while I finish the second drying rack and weight the second basin lid. The bait gate sits where she put it an hour ago. Silvers move past it, in, out, in again, the trait reading the gate without anyone telling it to. A bone tooth set into the coral lip catches a small piece of starlight every time the surf turns and lays it back down. Behind my sternum, the coral hums at a pitch I am starting to recognize. Park Guntae and 12 aboard are still 7 hours out, give or take the tide, which is closer than yesterday and farther than I would like. I leave Soye on the edge and walk the dry side once. Coral teeth, doubled along the east, doubled along the south. Red shell traps set in 3 pockets below the tide line where the surf flattens. A new line of bone teeth, set the way I would have set fish hooks if I had been setting them for boots instead of mouths, runs along my coral lip from the basin lid out to the broken raft. Broken raft itself I have dragged up the dry side and pinned to the coral with 2 vine knots and a wedge. Anybody who tries to use it as a footboard will pull both knots and put themselves over a row of bone teeth on the way down. Erect pallet turns into a step the wrong man is going to step on. That crab shell lid hums when I move past the basin. I rest my hand on it for one breath and then take it off since the panel under my sternum is more useful right now than a lid. System inventory opens. Coil of better rope, 1. Rusty knife with bundled edge, 1. Cloth squares, 2. Small fishing net, 1. Pearl hook fragment, 1. Bone teeth, 16 now, after the night stripping. Hide strips, plenty. Red shells, many. Crab shells, many. Blood crab meat on rack, 3 trays. Freshwater moss, 1 square. Hardwood roots, 3. Driftwood, plenty. Vines, several. Island coins, modest. Holding. Crude shell raft blueprint, used. Freshwater coral basin blueprint installed. Coral devour core capacity, 41% under current upkeep. Trade extraction queue, 2 slots open. 41 because I burned coral energy on the second basin lid. Reading it once was enough. I closed the panel. The sky east of the coral is the color of a bruise turning. Not sunrise yet, but on its way. Tide is dropping out and the bait gate hisses softly as the long pool drains a finger of water back into open sea. Soye does not turn from the edge, but the cold in the bond goes 1 notch warmer the way a room warms when somebody sets a lamp down. 3 breaths after the bruise becomes a bar of pale. The morning reef report opens on its own. The reef report section does not ask me what I want scanned today. It already knows. Target 1 of 2, Basalt Warskiff 9. Owner of record, Ma Sok-jin. Basalt owner, vessel deployed under his flag. Class, Basalt Warhol. Monster bone reinforced. Length along the keel, 26 meters. Crew complement, 12. 2 of them core-bound boarders under Sok-jin's flag. The other 10 free fighters paid in slave dock contracts. Armament, 2 slave dock branding chains forward. 1 core branding hook on the prow swivel. 4 monster bone hull crusher hooks port and starboard. 6 oars per side stacked in rigid frames. Engine of travel, oars plus bone sail rig stowed on the deck for following winds. Speed, 6 knots under oar, 8 under sail, half speed if the keel takes coral bite below the waterline. The basalt hull is heavy, the report writes, which means it tracks straight and turns slow. That keel runs deep, which means the warskiff has to enter shallow water along narrow channels, because anything else grounds it. The branding chains forward need a clean line of sight to the bound owner during the chain swing, which means the chain teams are exposed when the chains are out. That 2 core bound boarders aboard have their survival anchors back on the basalt island, not on the warskiff. So even if the warskiff sinks under them, the system will not erase them until Seokjin chooses to cut their cores. Free fighters 10 can be panicked. 2 of them have been paid less than the going rate, because Seokjin has been buying out rope and wood in this region, and the contract pool is thin. Captain of the war skiff is a free fighter named Han Pyo, who has lost 2 skiffs in the last season and was promoted to keep him from defecting. Han Pyo is the kind of captain who plays cautious until somebody on his deck shouts about the prize, after which he plays reckless. Warning at the bottom, the war skiff has been instructed to retreat if it loses more than 2 of the free fighters in the opening exchange, because Seokjin pays for holes and pays for contracts, but does not pay to rebuild a contract pool that is already thin. I would smile at the last line, but I am not in a smiling kind of mood. Target 2 of 2. Park Guntae, Mangrove Knife Island owner, escort vessel along Warskiff 9. Class, Mangrove Cutter, single mast, low draft, dark mangrove timbers. Crew, 3. Park Guntae himself plus 2 core-bound fighters, both bound to his island core. Armament, mangrove blade strapped at the hip, hook rope coiled along the rail. 3 boarding cleavers stowed forward. Engine of travel, sail and oar. Speed, 5 knots under sail. Vulnerabilities, hull is light and bites worse than a basalt keel under coral teeth. Crew is small. Backstory section sits under the vulnerabilities. Park Guntae, the report writes, owned 3 coastal villages before the Shard Tide migration. 2 of them ran rope, 1 of them ran saltfish. He lost them inside the first week to a competing owner who could move a whole island. Seokjin offered him a mangrove knife island for cheap, on contract, on the condition that he ride along on 3 raids per quarter at no charge as escort. Park Guntae has been on 23 raids in the last 2 quarters because Seokjin counts the cheap rope buyouts as raids. The grudge against unranked coral owners, that report writes, is that one of his saltfish villages was overrun by drift coral the week before the migration, and he has been blaming coral generally for the loss of an industry he liked. That report adds, neutrally, that this is not coral's fault, but is the shape of the grudge regardless. The mangrove cutter is small enough to capsize directly if the keel takes 1 bite from coral teeth below the waterline. Park Guntae himself fights with the mangrove blade in close range and is competent but tired. His 2 core-bound fighters, the report writes, are Doha and Kim Bora. Doha runs the hook rope, Kim Bora runs the boarding cleavers. Both have been with him for a year. Both have not been paid in 3 months. And neither one would still be standing on his deck if Seokjin had offered Park Guntae anything other than survival. That paragraph is asking the obvious. Park Guntae attacked first, technically. I close the report. Soye is looking at me from the seaward edge. I tell her, indirect through the bond because shouting across the basin would carry farther than I want, that the warskiff will come from the northwest and the cutter will come behind it on a parallel line, that the warskiff will commit to a chain swing inside 30 meters because Han Pyo plays reckless once somebody on his deck names the prize, and that the cutter will try to flank the south edge because Park Guntae has been told by that report's own helpful note that the south edge is shallow. She tells me, indirect back, that her bait gate can be set to draw the silvers along the south edge in a wide arc that will look like a feeding swarm to a low draft cutter, that the silvers will scatter at the right moment if she pulses the gate, and that a low draft cutter following a scattering swarm will run into the red shell traps before the man at the tiller has a chance to read what just happened. Her voice in the bond is colder than the bond itself, which I take to mean she is awake. A small piece of me notes that I would have paid honest money to have a fisher of her caliber on a market dock 6 months ago. The piece goes back in my pocket. Honest math now, not later. The sun rises the rest of the way while we work. 5 hours becomes 3. 3 becomes 1. 1 becomes a horizon line with 2 dots on it that the basic sea map confirms before the eye can. Warskiff 9 takes the northwest line the report predicted. The mangrove cutter holds a parallel 200 meters off. Both hulls slow on the half-range circle. Han Pyo is at the warskiff's tiller. Hand off the wheel for a moment to point at the coral and then back on it. Park Guntae is at the cutter's prow with the mangrove blade across his shoulders. Doha sits low at the cutter's hook rope. Kim Bora has the boarding cleavers laid in a row along the cutter's rail. A reef shrimp moves along the coral lip near my heel, and the trait under the basin hums, and Soye, on the seaward edge, lifts her spear once and lays it back across her shoulders. I open the bait gate. The silvers go through the gate fast, in a line, the leading edge of the swarm bending south along the curve Soye set last night, the back of the swarm thickening as more fish read the new opening. A flatfish slides through the middle. 1 reef shrimp tumbles out of the gate behind the swarm, because shrimp are not subtle. The silver bar of fish curves along the south edge of my coral, and the bar passes over the first red shell trap pocket and keeps going. From 200 meters off, on a low cutter, the bar looks like a feeding swarm with a soft heart. Park Guntae's hand moves on the tiller. Cutter swings south. Warskiff 9 holds northwest the way the report said it would because Han Pyo is reading the warskiff's own depth and not the swarm. The chain team forward on Warskiff 9 starts the first chain swing at 60 meters out. That branding chain rises off the deck in a long arc, and Han Pyo's voice carries across the water in the half-shout a captain uses when he is naming a prize and a prize price at the same time. Soye flinches at the edge but does not turn because the bond is doing the work of a flinch for her. I lift my hand off the basin lid. The chain comes down at 40 meters, and the chain end smacks the water 10 meters short of the seaward edge. Spray. Han Pyo's voice carries again louder, naming the second swing. 20 meters. Han Pyo plays reckless on the second swing, as the report said he would. The chain rises in a flatter arc this time, the chain end coming in low across the water for the long reach, because Han Pyo wants the chain end to land on the basin lid, where the bond between Soye and the coral is densest. That chain end goes over the seaward edge at 8 meters, and Soye drops below the lip the way I told her to before the sun came up. Chain hits the basin lid. The lid takes the hit, and the second weight on the lid takes the rest of the hit, and the lid does not move. Chain end skips off the lid and falls into the long pool, and the long pool silvers, which Soye has been training all night do what silvers do when something thrashes in their water. They scatter, and the scatter pulls the chain end out into a tangle of pool gates that catch it cleanly. Han Pyo shouts the order to retract. The chain team forward on War Skiff 9 starts the retract. Coral teeth below the waterline, where the chain was retracted across. Take the chain along the line where it crosses the lip. 2 bone teeth catch the chain on the underside, and the chain stops retracting. The warskiff's bow comes down, the rest of how given, the chain is still under tension, and the keel of the warskiff is heavy. Bow hits coral. The keel hits a row of red shell traps below the tide line, and the warskiff slows hard. A deceleration that throws Han Pyo's chain team off their feet and tips the second branding chain across the deck, without anyone to swing it. One of the free fighters at midships pitches off the rail and goes into the water on the seaward side. Free fighter number 2 on the bow tries to cut the chain free with a hand cleaver, and his cleaver gets caught in the same coral lip the chain is caught on, which I notice and file for later. Park Gun-tae's cutter is already in the south pocket by then. The cutter's hull, like the way that report said it was, hits the red shell trap on the south edge at 5 knots. That trap does what red shells do when something heavy lands on them. Hull goes brittle on the seaward strake. Park Gun-tae shouts an order at Doha that the bond does not need to translate because the report told me the shape of every order Park Gun-tae issues under pressure. Doha throws the hook rope long, and the hook catches the coral lip above the basin, and Park Gun-tae transfers his weight to the rope to drag the cutter back off the trap. Rope holds, coral lip does not. A bone tooth I set last night along my coral lip takes the hook rope where the rope goes over the lip. Rope frays at the bone tooth. Park Gun-tae shouts again. Doha doubles the hook. Kim Bora throws the first boarding cleaver across the pocket towards Soye's spear hand. She throws well, which the report had not mentioned. The cleaver comes in across the pocket fast, and Soye lifts her spear once to deflect it, and Soye's deflect takes the cleaver in the haft instead of the blade, because Soye is a fisher and not a soldier. Cleaver knocks the spear out of her hand. The cold in the bond goes to a temperature I do not have a name for. Doha is already over the south edge with the second hook in his hand, and Kim Bora is on the rail with a second cleaver. And Park Gun-tae has come off the cutter prow onto the coral lip with the mangrove blade in his right hand and his left hand free to hold the rope. And there is a free fighter from the warskiff who has gotten his cleaver out of the coral and is coming over the seaward edge behind the chain team's second attempt at the basin lid. And one of the warskiff's core-bound boarders has come down the warskiff's tilted prow because Han Pyo finally named the prize loud enough. 5 men on my coral inside 10 seconds. The count is wrong, and the count is going to be wrong for the next 30 seconds. I do not try to hold every line at once. I give them a line I can afford to lose, and I take the line they did not bring enough men to. I let the south pocket go. Soye picks up her spear off the lip with her foot, kicks it up into her hand, and falls back along the inside of the coral teeth toward the basin, without turning her back, which is the right move seeing the men coming over the south edge are men who have not been on a live coral lip before. Doha plants his foot on the lip, and a bone tooth set into the lip last night goes through his soul. He does not scream because he has been trained not to scream, but his weight comes off the planted foot too fast, and Kim Bora behind him stumbles. Park Gun-tae steps over Doha with the mangrove blade up and his eyes on me, because the report was right about the grudge. I take the line he did not bring enough men to. Han Pyo's chain team forward on Warskiff 9 is exposed. The first chain is still caught on the bone teeth under the lip. That second chain is on the deck untended with the free fighter, who is supposed to swing it, is in the water on the seaward side. The warskiff is grounded on the trap, and the keel is taking another bite of coral teeth every time the surf turns. Han Pyo is shouting at the chain team to cut the first chain free, which the team is trying to do, with the cleaver that is also stuck in the coral lip. I go for the hook rope instead. Park Gun-tae's hook rope, doubled by Doha and frayed at the bone tooth, runs from my coral lip back to the cutter's bow. The cutter is sitting half on the red shell trap and half off, the seaward strake brittle, the man at the tiller having abandoned the tiller to come over the south edge. That rope is the only thing holding the cutter against the lip. If the rope goes, the cutter drifts out on a surf turn, and the cutter's hull, brittle, catches the next coral tooth as it swings past, and the cutter is gone in 2 breaths. Park Gun-tae knows this, of course, which is why he is between me and the rope with the mangrove blade up. He swings high. The mangrove blade is heavy, and he swings it like a man who has not slept enough in the last 2 quarters. I move under the swing because under is the only direction that does not put me on a coral tooth, and as I go under, I take the rusty knife with the bundled edge off my belt and put it into the rope where the bone tooth has already done half the work for me. 2 strokes. The rope parts at the bone tooth. That cutter drifts out on the surf turn. The cutter's seaward straight catches the next coral tooth as it swings past, and the hull goes the rest of the way brittle, and the cutter takes water from the seaward side, and the cutter is gone in 2 breaths, exactly the way I had said it would be in the back of my head. Even though the back of my head was not supposed to be in charge of an island. Park Gunte makes a sound that is not a scream, because the mangrove cutter was his raid anchor, and the raid anchor going down means his core is now exposed through the conquest interface. He swings the blade again. This time the swing is fast because Park Gunte is fighting for an anchor he no longer has. I move sideways instead of under because under was a one-time move, and the lip behind me has another row of bone teeth I would rather not back into. The blade comes across at chest height. My broken spear comes up from my belt, the 2 bone teeth wrapped at the tip catching the blade along the inside of the swing, which the spear was rebuilt for. Blade slides off the bone teeth. Park Gunte stumbles half a step because he expected the blade to go through. I do not stab him. The conquest interface is already pinging at the back of my head, and the bond between Park Gunte and the cutter is dimming since the cutter is on its way down, and the bond between Park Gunte and his island core is fraying. What I do is hook the broken spear's bone teeth into the strap of his mangrove blade and twist. The blade comes out of his hand and goes over the lip into the water. He goes down to one knee because the strap took half his shoulder with it. The conquest interface opens fully under my sternum the moment his knee touches the coral. 3 options under his name: break core, absorb core, bind core. A 4th option, smaller, sitting under all 3. Capture core-bound anchor tags before owner core resolves. 2 tags available, Doha and Kimbora. Window, 12 seconds. Failure to capture before resolution erases tag survivors. I tap the 4th option first, since the 4th option is the one with the count on it. 2 tags load into the trade extraction queue. Doha, Kimbora. The queue had 2 open slots before this morning and it has 0 now. Park Gunte looks up at me from one knee. The conquest interface is still pulsing. His island core on the mangrove knife island somewhere to the northwest is exposed through the interface for the window the warskiff and the cutter together opened. I tap absorb core. The system asks me to confirm. I confirm. Park Gunte stops being on his knee on my coral. The mangrove knife island, off the basic sea map at the edge of the half-range circle, goes dark on the map for a breath, and then comes back as a smaller silhouette under my flag, linked, with a thin orange band across it that the system labels as mangrove knife root, trade extracted, growing along coral edge. Doha and Kimbora are still standing on the south pocket of my coral. Neither one is moving. Both of their faces have gone the gray that I saw on Soye's face yesterday morning when the bond closed for her. They look at me the way 2 people who just felt their old anchor disappear and a new anchor catch them in the same breath are going to look at the new anchor. Doha's foot is still on the bone tooth. He has not moved it. I tell him, indirect through the system because direct would be worse right now, to take the foot off the tooth. He takes the foot off the tooth. Kimbora's hand is still on the second boarding cleaver. I tell her, indirect, to set the cleaver down on the lip. She sets it down. Soye at the basin is breathing how a fisher breathes when the boat has just stopped pitching. She does not look at Doha or Kimbora. Then she looks at me, once, and the cold in the bond goes back 2 degrees to where it was an hour ago, which is the most I am going to get from her this morning. Warskiff 9 is the next thing to deal with. Han Pyo's chain team forward is still trying to cut the first chain free. The second free fighter at midships is climbing back up the rail from the seaward side, soaked, with no cleaver. That core-bound boarder who came down the prow earlier is standing on the coral 6 meters from me with the prow's swivel hook in his hand and an expression that says he has been told once too often that pay is coming. He is not going to fight me. Then he is not going to walk off either, because his anchor is on the basalt island and not in his head. The warskiff itself is the live anchor. That chain team forward is still trying because the chain team has not been told to stop. I walk past Doha and Kimbora to the seaward edge. Han Pyo sees me across 40 meters of water. In the line of his jaw goes the kind of slack that a captain's jaw goes when the captain realizes the warskiff is the only chip he has left on the table, and the chip is not enough. He shouts the order to retract the second chain given the second chain is still on the deck, and a chain on the deck is a chain that could be swung. The chain team obeys him because the chain team is paid by the warskiff and not by Sokjin. I let Han Pyo make his choice. He chooses the order I would have chosen in his place. Then he cuts the first chain free with an axe, seeing the cleaver is still stuck in my coral lip, and he is not going to recover it. The first chain falls off the lip into the water. That warskiff lifts a half-meter off the trap because the chain was the only thing holding the keel down. Han Pyo shouts the order to back oars. The warskiff backs off the trap. Slowly, with the keel has another row of bone teeth gnawing at it on every surf turn, but it moves. He does not run the warskiff onto the trap again, and he turns the bow northwest, into the line he came in on, and the warskiff goes back the way it came at half speed, because the keel is taking water at one of the trap bites. The core-bound boarder on the coral 6 meters from me looks at the warskiff and looks at me. I tell him, indirect, that he can swim to the warskiff or he can stand here, but he cannot stay on the coral if he wants his anchor to follow him. He swims to the warskiff. Han Pyo helps him over the rail without looking back at my coral. The war skiff fades into the northwest line. That thin red route plot Seokjin sent me yesterday curls itself off the basic sea map as the war skiff is no longer pointed at me. I close the conquest interface. The coral hums lower because the mangrove knife root is settling into the seaward lip, growing along the edge where the bone teeth were set last night. A thin orange band reading itself into the system panel is living defense. Coral teeth gain a half step of length. The bone teeth I set by hand last night become part of the trait. That basin lid stops humming since the chain hit it once, and the lid has decided that is enough chain for the morning. The system pings under my sternum. Coral growth tick. Reef camp closes. Coral base opens. That coral base inherits coral rings freshwater basin, long pool, drying racks, and red shell edge gains mangrove knife root along seaward lip, gains active coral teeth defense, gains capacity for one additional structure. Bone sailboat construction slot available pending blueprint. I read the tick twice. The second time the panel adds a small line at the bottom. Captured bound survivors, Doha fighter. Both core bound under your flag at low rank until reassigned. Daily upkeep 4% per survivor at current scale. Combined with Han Soye, total daily upkeep 23%. 23% off the top before I do anything else. I look at Doha. Doha is standing where I told him to stand. Kim Bora has picked up the boarding cleaver she set down because she does not know what to do with her hands. Both of them are waiting because both of them know that the new anchor is the one telling them how to wait. I tell Doha, indirect, that the broken raft on the dry side needs to be moved off the coral lip and broken down for driftwood, and that he can start with the broken raft because the broken raft is a job that does not require him to like me. He goes to the raft. I tell Kim Bora, indirect, that the second drying rack needs a third tray and that the second tray on the first rack needs to be turned. She goes to the rack. Soye is watching the south pocket. Doha's foot is bleeding into the coral. The coral is taking the blood as the basin took the chain. She tells me, indirect, that the south pocket needs a new red shell pocket given the first one has been spent, and that she can lay the new one inside the hour if I can pull 6 more shells from the inventory. I pull the shells. She lays the pocket. 3 hours after sunrise, Warskiff 9 is 200 kilometers northwest, and the mangrove cutter is on the seabed under my south edge, and Park Guntae is a thin orange band along my coral lip. Doha and Kim Bora are mine to feed. The Coral Devour core capacity panel reads at 56% under current upkeep, because absorbing a mangrove knife island raised the cap. First piece of good news the panel has given me this season. I sit down on the basin lid for the first time in 12 hours and eat a strip of dried blood crab meat off the second drying rack. The meat is honest. That basin lid is warm under me because my coral is warm under the lid. A second section opens on its own under my sternum without being asked. Archipelago chat scrolls. Warskiff 9 returning to basalt docks. Hull damage at 38%. No core-bound losses, 1 free fighters injured. Park Guntae, Mangrove Knife Island owner. Status erased. Mangrove Knife Island linked under unranked coral owner. 2 core-bound survivors captured under coral flag. Coral owner designation pending. Chat reacts the way a market reacts to a price that just moved. Mockery. 3 accounts, dropping off after the first 2 replies because 3 accounts have already noticed that an unranked coral does not normally absorb a subordinate owner's island. Speculation. 6 accounts on what the coral actually is. Threats. 2 accounts, both from accounts that are in turn subordinate to Seokjin. 1 account, a name I have not seen before, posts a single line asking how the absorption was done. Seokjin himself does not post. I close the chat panel and put another strip of meat in my mouth. Doha is splitting raft planks against the coral lip, and Kim Bora is turning trays on the rack, and Soye is laying the new shell pocket along the south edge, and the long pool is stocking again, seeing the silvers have come back to the gate now that the war skiff is gone. The trade is working, the bait gate is working, my coral teeth are growing into the mangrove knife root as fingers grow into a glove. You do not rest after a win, you spend the win. So I open the morning reef report selector for tomorrow. The default island scan slot is open again. That threat priority option is gone, because the war skiff is gone. The half-range circle on the basic sea map has resolved into a clean pattern overnight. 3 pings in range, 1 of them owned and steady, 1 of them unowned and faint. 1 of them unowned and rated as a dungeon by that report's first pass tag with the silhouette is a closed ring of coral with the wrong color in the middle. I select the dungeon silhouette. Confirm. Panel acknowledges. Tomorrow's report will scan the dungeon. Tonight I sleep 2 hours because 2 hours is what the math allows after a defense that long. Soy sleeps along the basin lid because the basin lid is warm. Doha sleeps on the broken raft planks because he has chosen, without being told, that the broken raft is where his rank goes. Kim Bora sleeps near the second drying rack with the boarding cleaver across her shins. The crab shell lid hums softly all night. I dream, briefly, of a dock at low season, and then I wake up as the reef report is pinging. Morning reef report. Target 1 of 1. Dungeon reef silhouette. Name, Hollow Spine Reef. Unowned. Closed ring of coral roughly 400 meters across at the outer rim. Danger rating. Mid. Best landing, the south-southwest gap where the outer ring breaks for 1 meter at low tide. Conquest condition. Link rather than absorb. Warning. The gap seals behind a raider on the inflow until the next outflow. Soye is awake at the basin already. Doha is back on the raft. Kimbora has the second tray going. The crab shell lid is humming. That bond reads 3 steady lines now. 1 Soy, 1 Doha, 1 Kimbora. The 3 lines breathing at 3 different rates and all of them in some version of fine. I tell Soy that I am going to Hollow Spine Reef solo because the report calls for 1 raider and not 3, and that she has the camp until I come back with a bone hook rod and a half-built boat, and that if the bond goes cold for longer than a tide cycle, she should assume the dungeon tide closed wrong and read the panel since the panel will tell her what the bond cannot. She tells me, indirect, that the south pocket is settled and the basin lid is weighted and the long pool is full, and that she does not need a speech because she has held a damaged island once already, and a defended one once already, both with me on the seaward edge. Doha looks up from the raft planks once. Kimbora does not look up from the rack. I take the shell raft, the bone teeth that did not make it into the seaward lip last night, the rusty knife with the bundled edge, 2 strips of dried blood crab meat, 1 square of cloth, the small fishing net, and the broken spear that has now bitten a mangrove blade and lived. Then I do not take the pearl hook fragment because the report says the chest will give me a real one. Hollow Spine Reef is 2 hours southwest under the shell raft. The raft has been retarred since yesterday, and the cracks are holding in the surf. On how out is the long lazy turn that surf takes after a defended morning. Half-range circle on the basic sea map closes behind me as I move past the second ping. The new orange band along my coral edge reads behind me in the system panel. That south-southwest gap is exactly where the report said it was. 1 meter wide at low tide, dark water inside the ring, the inner color of the dungeon reading green-black against the outer reef's living gray. I push the shell raft through the gap on the outflow, and the gap seals behind the raft the moment the raft clears it. The coral closing not with a snap, but with the slow shut of a clam that has been waiting all morning. And I am inside. The inner ring is a basin maybe 300 meters across, water shallow at the edges, deeper at the central spine where the ring narrows to a single rib of dark coral going up out of the water like a finger. Bone eels move along the inner ring in slow figure eights, 4 of them visible, more under the water. Reef crawlers, hand-sized, scuttle along the floor in clusters. The water smells as water smells when something has been dying in it for a long time without ever finishing. I bait the small fishing net with the first strip of blood crab meat and lower it off the raft. A bone eel hits the net inside a breath. The eel is longer than the raft and thinner than my arm, and the head is mostly tooth. That net holds, given the net is good and the meat is good and the eel is hungry. I bring the eel up against the raft, kill it with the broken spear's bone teeth in the soft notch behind the head, and pull eel bones out of the body the way you pull bones out of a saltfish at the market. 6 clean bones go into the hide bag. The eel's core, smaller than a thumbnail, comes out of the body cavity with the second cleanest pull I have done since the migration. I do this 3 more times along the inner ring because that report said bone eels along the inner ring, and I am not in the mood to walk past a resource the report has named. 4 eel cores, 24 eel bones, 2 sailweed bales pulled out of the seabed with the small net, and the broken spear's bone teeth have eaten enough eel skin to need a rewrap. I rewrap them on the raft with one of the cloth squares and tie off with vine. The new wrap holds. Central spine sits in the middle of the basin with the chest at the base. I row the raft to the spine in 12 clean strokes, seeing the surf inside the dungeon ring is dead, and the raft moves as a raft moves on a closed harbor. Reef crawlers scatter off the spine base as the raft touches. The chest, sealed by the coral, is held closed by a single bone latch the size of my palm. That dungeon boss reads as 1 larger bone eel at the central spine in the report. The boss is in the chest. That bone latch is the boss. The chest is not a chest. What sits at the spine is a coiled bone eel head, with the rest of the eel wound around the spine under the water, and the head is hinged at the bottom the way a chest is hinged, and the latch is a tooth. On a job where the chest is the boss, you do not try to open the chest. You feed the chest until the chest decides you are friendly, and then you walk away with whatever the chest spits out when it stops eating. I take the second strip of dried blood crab meat off my belt and put it through the bone latch. The latch unhinges around the meat. That eel head opens. The rest of the eel uncoils off the central spine and rises out of the water in a single long curve that goes higher than the raft. Mouth opens wide enough to take the raft. The eel reads the meat first, because the meat is the first thing in its mouth. It swallows the meat. I put the broken spear, bone teeth and all, into the soft notch at the inside of the upper jaw, where the eel skin is thinnest with the 4 eels along the inner ring told me where the notch is. The eel goes down to 1 coil on the spine because the broken spear has hit the right notch. I hook the small fishing net under its lower jaw and pull. The lower jaw comes open the rest of how. That chest, which is also the eel, is open all the way down to the throat. Inside the throat, sitting on a bed of pearl sand, is the bone sailboat blueprint folded twice. Under the blueprint is a small ceramic jar marked with the system symbol for a crafting recipe, which the panel translates as coral repair paste, the same coral paste Haran uses on monster wounds. Except this one is the recipe. Beneath the jar are 3 clean bone hooks, factory finished, the kind you do not have to file. Under the hooks is a single tied pearl the size of a fingertip, which the report had not mentioned, as that report had said pearl sand and not pearl. I take all of it. The eel goes down to 2 coils and the chest closes. The dungeon list pings. Hollow spine reef. Dungeon boss disabled. Refresh cycle started. 4 tide cycles to next boss respawn. Loot collected. Link as dungeon reef territory available. I tap link. The closed ring of coral, 400 meters across, goes onto the basic sea map under my flag. With a thin gray band the system labels as Hollow Spine Reef. Dungeon linked, refresh 4 tides. That south-southwest gap opens because the gap reads me as the owner now, and the gap does not close on the owner. I row the raft back through the gap. The inner color of the dungeon goes black behind me. That outer reef holds. Hollow Spine Reef is the second island under my flag in 2 days, and the first one that is going to keep producing on its own without me being there. And that piece of news lands harder than the war skiff fading northwest yesterday did. The shell raft takes me back to reef camp, which the system has now decided is coral base, over the rest of the morning. That new gray band on the basic sea map sits behind me at the edge of the half-range circle. Swai is on the seaward edge when I come in. The 2 drying racks have 3 trays each on them. Doha has finished breaking down the broken raft and has started piling the driftwood the way somebody who has stacked saltfish for a quarter would stack driftwood. Kimbora has the second boarding cleaver across her shins and is doing something with the small fishing net that looks like a mend. I land the shell raft on the dry side and put the bone sailboat blueprint on the basin lid where everyone can see it. That blueprint unfolds itself in the system panel. The bone hook rod assembles in the construction slot the moment I drop the 3 factory finished bone hooks into the slot, since the rod is the easy build and the boat is the hard one. That boat construction slot opens with a list of materials the panel says I am short on by 60%, which is honest because Hollow Spine Reef only gave me the blueprint and not the timbers. The coral repair paste recipe loads into the medicine shelf slot the panel labels as not yet active, because coral base does not have a medicine shelf yet. That medicine shelf needs an herb trait. Each herb trait is on an island I have not scanned. I open the morning reef report selector again because that is the next move. There are 7 hours of daylight left, and I have been awake for 30 out of the last 40. I select the unowned faint silhouette on the basic sea map for tomorrow's scan, because the unowned faint silhouette is the only thing in the half-range circle the report has not yet read, and the panel is telling me the silhouette is a herb island that has gone into the wrong color as reefs go into the wrong color before they die. Then I eat a 3rd strip of blood crab meat off the rack and sleep 4 hours under the basin lid, because 4 hours is what the math allows. I wake up on the sunrise side of the lid. The morning reef report opens before I open my eyes. Target 1 of 1, unowned faint silhouette. Southwest quadrant. Name, Green Spring Herbed Island. Owner status, owned. Moon Heron, Herb Island owner, status pending. Status pending, the report writes, given the island core is 15% fractured from spore root contamination, and the owner is alive but no longer the controlling voice on her own panel. Monster, spore-crowned toad, mid-rated, currently rooted at the spring head with secondary spore roots reaching the central herb terrace. Conquest condition, clear the toad and the spore roots before the fracture reaches 60%. The report adds, below the condition that the owner has been holding the spring head for the last 2 tide cycles with a knife and a sensor of herb smoke, and that she is, as of the morning scan, conscious, weak, and not in a mood to be rescued by anyone who reads the Conquest interface and likes what they see there. Coral repair paste is in my inventory now, because the dungeon gave me the recipe and the basin lid gave me the work surface, and Hollow Spine Reef gave me the eel cores and the eel cores gave me the binder. I take 3 jars of it, the bone hook rod, the broken spear with the freshly wrapped bone teeth, the rusty knife, 2 strips of dried blood crab meat, a square of cloth, the small fishing net, and the shell raft. And I tell Soy that I am going to Green Spring Herbed Island and that the camp will hold the way it held yesterday. And she tells me, indirect, that the bait gate is set and the south pocket is settled, and that she will hold the seaward edge with her spear, because she has done it twice now and she is in no mood to be retrained on a 3rd day. Doha and Kimbora do not need to be told what to do. Green Spring Herbed Island is 3 hours southwest under the shell raft. The raft holds. That surf turns once on how and the basic sea map closes behind me again, and the bond reads 3 steady lines back at the camp. The island shows on the horizon as a thin ridge with a smear of the wrong color along the high ground. That wrong color is gray-green, the way a leaf goes gray-green before the leaf falls. Spore roots, the report had said. Secondary, reaching the central herb terrace. 2 tide cycles, that report had said, of 1 woman with a knife and a sensor holding a spring head. I beach the raft on the seaward sand and pull it above the tide line. The spore-crowned toad is on the central herb terrace, exactly where the report said. That toad is the size of a dog, and the crown along its back is a ring of bone-pale fruiting bodies that twitch every breath. Spore roots, gray-green, run out of the toad in 3 thick lines that I count. Seeing the report did not tell me the count, and the count matters. The first line runs to the spring head, That second runs along the central terrace. The third loops around the back of the toad into a small herb patch the toad has already eaten through. That spring head is up the slope behind the terrace. A woman stands at the spring head with a fisherman's knife in her right hand, and a censer of smoking herb in her left hand, and a face the color of old paper. Her hair is tied back with a strip of the same gray-green cloth I can see all over the central terrace, which means she has been cutting spore roots and using the dead root cloth as a tie, because she has not slept in 2 tide cycles, and she is conserving cloth as you conserve any small useful thing on a job that has gone long. She sees me come up the seaward sand, and she does not lower the knife. Then she tells me, across 40 meters of slope and herb smoke, indirect through whatever channel the panel is using to bridge 2 owners who have not consented to a bond, that she has read my approach on her panel for the last hour. That her panel has labeled me as unranked coral owner with a fresh conquest history and an open trade extraction queue with 1 open slot, and that she has spent the last hour trying to decide whether the open slot is for her trait or her core. I tell her, indirect back, that the open slot is for whatever the conquest condition lets me take, and that the conquest condition says I need to clear the toad first. She tells me that the conquest condition is the part the panel writes for owners with the upper hand, and that the part the panel does not write is what an owner with a fractured core thinks about an unranked coral with a fresh conquest history walking up her seaward slope with 3 jars of coral paste in his hide bag. I tell her, indirect, that the 3 jars are for the toad's spore wounds and not hers, because the paste seals monster bite and not core fracture, and that I have no current way to seal a core fracture, and that she would already know that if she had been reading the panel as long as her face says she has. A breath passes. The censer in her left hand stops smoking for 1 second because she has stopped moving it. She tells me, indirect, that I should clear the toad before she changes her mind about the knife. I clear the toad. A spore-crowned toad with 3 spore roots wants the roots cut in reverse order. The toad will not move until the 3rd root is cut. The 3rd root is the one looped around the back into the dead herb patch, and the dead herb patch is the only place on the terrace where the spores have nothing fresh to feed on. So I bait the small fishing net with the 2nd strip of dried blood crab meat, throw the net across the dead herb patch, and the 3rd root, which had been looking for fresh food in the dead patch all morning, comes up through the patch and into the net. I cut the 3rd root with the rusty knife. The toad turns because the 3rd root was where its balance was. That crown along its back twitches harder. The 2nd root, which runs along the central terrace, goes taut as the toad is now drawing on its main feed line. I bait the net again with the 1st strip of dried blood crab meat, throw the net along the 2nd root's middle, and the 2nd root rises and bites the net. And I cut the 2nd root. The toad's croak is the sound a wet sack makes when somebody drops it on a hard floor. That 1st root, which runs to the spring head, goes taut. The woman at the spring head moves the censer along the root the moment it goes taut, and the herb smoke does something to the root that the report had not specified, which is that the root flinches. I cut the 1st root. The toad has nothing left except itself. I put the broken spear, with the rewrapped bone teeth, into the toad's underside where the skin is thinnest, the same notch that report had said the toad's notch was. The toad does not finish its 2nd croak. That crown along its back goes still inside 2 breaths. Fast kills usually mean you miss something, but the toad's underside notch was a notch I had read about in the report, and a notch 4 bone eels along the dungeon ring had taught my spear to find. That crown along the back stays still. The reef report pings. Spore crown toad cleared. These spore roots, 3 of 3, cut. Primary contamination removed. Secondary spore body, the crown, still active in 3 minutes if not destroyed. I take the crown off the back with the rusty knife. The crown comes off cleanly because the toad's back is already dead. That crown's fruiting bodies, bone pale and twitching, go into one of the 3 coral paste jars since my coral paste binds the spores, as the recipe in my panel said it would. The jar seals. That terrace stops twitching. Each dead herb patch behind the toad goes from gray-green to gray, then to brown, then begins to read in the panel as fertilizer grade after the recipe's purification pass. The woman at the spring head has lowered the knife. She tells me, indirect, that her core is at 57% fracture, and that the conquest condition for her island clears in 1 minute if I move now, and that she has decided, in the time it took me to cut 3 roots, that the open slot in my trait extraction queue is for her trait if I am willing to bind her core before the fracture finishes. The conquest interface opens under my sternum the moment she finishes the sentence. 3 options: break core, absorb core, bind core. The report had said the owner cannot survive if the core collapses. That fracture reads at 57% and rising. I tap bind core. The system asks me to confirm because bind core is the choice that ties an owner's survival to mine. I confirm. Moon Haran's core stops fracturing at 57% because the binding is caught it where it is. The fracture lines close, not heal, but close. The way a crack in a hull closes when the hull is dragged out of the water and pinned to a dock. Her panel hands me the trait extraction queue slot. The trait green spring herb soil settles into the slot. That island itself, the herb terrace and the spring head and the seaward sand and the dead herb patch, links as outer reef territory under my flag with a thin green band the system labels as Green Spring Herbed Island, linked, fertilizer grade. Coral base panel ticks. Medicine shelf active. Healing herb patch planted. Poison cleaning basin available pending construction. Coral repair paste recipe, now in active production. That coral brand vulnerability, the system writes in a smaller line at the bottom. Reduced by 12% because Greenspring herbed soil neutralizes slave dock tracking inks at the active brand site. I had not asked the panel about the slave dock tracking inks. The panel had noticed on its own. Harin is sitting down at the spring head now given the binding has taken what was left of her standing strength. The sensor is on the ground beside her. That knife is on her lap. Her face is still old paper colored, but the breathing is the kind of breathing that says the next breath is going to come on its own. I walk up the slope to the spring head. She tells me, indirect because direct would be more than she has the breath for, that the spring stone she has been guarding is the clean stone the report mentioned, and that it sits under the spring head, and that I should take it because the stone is the thing that purifies the spore root into fertilizer grade, and that the stone is not optional, and that without the stone the dead patch becomes spore spreading again inside a tide cycle. I take the stone. The stone is the size of my fist and the color of wet salt. I put it on the dead patch where the panel said the recipe needed it. The dead patch's gray-brown deepens into a clean brown. That purified spore root goes into the coral via the linked island connection, fed to the reef as fertilizer at the new herb patch's edge. Harin tells me, indirect, that she has been holding the spring head for 58 hours and that she would like to sit down for a longer time than this. I tell her, indirect back, that the camp is 3 hours northeast under the shell raft, and that the basin lid is warm, and that Soy holds the seaward edge there, and Doha breaks driftwood, and Kimbora turns trays, and that the medicine shelf has just opened at the camp because of her, and that the shelf does not have a healer on it yet. She tells me, indirect, that she will sit on the raft because she does not have the legs for a swim. I help her down to the raft. The bond between her and the coral settles on the row out. 3 lines on the bond become 4. The new line breathes slower than Soy's because Harin is sleeping by the time we are halfway home. The kind of sleep a person takes when they have been holding a spring head for 58 hours with a knife and a sensor. Coral Base sees the raft come in from the seaward sand. Soye is on the edge with her spear because the bond told her the raft was coming with 2 passengers. Doha and Kimbora are at the basin lid. The trays are turning. That crab shell lid is humming. The new medicine shelf is sitting under the dry side of the basin as a frame waiting for a healer. I beach the raft. Swai looks at Harin once. Harin is asleep. Swai looks at me. The cold in the bond drops 2 degrees, which is not warmth, but it is also not the cold she had when Park Gunte came over the south edge yesterday morning. She tells me, indirect, that the medicine shelf needs the spring stone in the lower frame and the herb seedlings along the upper frame, and that she does not need me to teach her how a shelf is set up. I let her set up the shelf. Harin sleeps on the basin lid for 6 hours. When she wakes up, she sits up without help, looks at the medicine shelf Soya set up, walks to it without help, and starts grinding the first coral paste batch into a working antidote drop. Her hands move how hands move that have been doing this work since the migration. The coral repair paste recipe upgrades itself in the panel as the antidote drop comes off the shelf, because the recipe was waiting for an actual healer to finish it. That medicine shelf goes from frame to active inside the first batch. I sell 6 antidote drops in the island market that afternoon. 3 of them go to owners who have been bitten by reef snakes along the southern trade lanes and who have been paying double for paste from Shokjin's market lieutenants. My price is 20% under the lieutenant price because 20% under undercuts the lieutenants without inviting Shokjin to lower his own price the same day. The market processes the transactions inside the hour. Island coins come in at a rate that is no longer modest. Coral-based panel ticks again at dusk. Healing herb patch, active. Poison cleaning basin, active. Coral brand vulnerability, the panel writes in a slightly larger line this time. With the panel has noticed I was rigging for it last night. Reduced by 24%, slave dock tracking ink at the seaward lip. Residual reading from this morning's chain swing, fading at 1% per tide cycle. Estimated full breakdown of brand, 16 tide cycles, accelerated by the new herb patch in the basin. The brand was set by Han Pyo's first chain swing yesterday. I had not bothered to look at it because the chain hit the lid and not the lip. The panel had noticed. Honest work is work where the thing you needed to fix gets fixed by the thing you did to fix the other thing. Soy and Harin sit at the basin lid together, while I do the books. Doha is on a new pile of driftwood. Kimbora has finished the mend on the small fishing net and has moved to the second drying rack. The bond reads 4 lines now, 4 breathing rates, 4 anchors, and one of them, the new one, Harin's, is starting to read in the same rhythm as Soy's the way 2 people who have not yet decided whether to like each other read the same room. My coral holds steady all evening. Dusk comes the long way over the reef edge. The morning reef report selector for tomorrow is open under my sternum, and I have not chosen yet. That half-range circle has 2 new pings since this morning. One is unowned, faint, eastward. The other is owned, steady north-northwest, with the yellow of a small independent owner and not the yellow of a Seokjin subordinate. I am going to take a 3rd strip of dried blood crab meat off the rack and pick the eastward unowned ping when the panel pings on its own, without being asked, which is the kind of ping I have learned, in 2 days to mind. Archipelago chat opens. Header line open bounty posted basalt flag. Body of the post is short. Maseokjin, basalt owner, posts a public bounty in island coins. The number large enough that the chat above and below the bounty stops moving for the time it takes to read it. The bounty is not for my coral, the post writes. That bounty is for information. Anyone who can submit, through verified market channel, a description of how the unranked coral owner in the southwest quadrant absorbs subordinate owner cores will be paid the listed sum in full inside the same tide cycle. Submissions accepted from owners, core-bound survivors, raid captains, market lieutenants, ranking watchers, and chat handles. Anonymity guaranteed under basalt flag. Bounty number sits at the bottom of the post in a large bright font. Chat reaction is not mockery this time. Speculation reaction is the silence that a market makes when somebody puts a bid on the table that is larger than the bids before it. 3 accounts post one-line replies inside a breath. The first reply is a question about whether a market lieutenant inside Seokjin's own ranks can submit. The third reply is a chat handle I have seen exactly once before. The same handle that asked yesterday how the absorption was done. That handle posts a single line under the bounty. It writes that the unranked coral owner currently holds 3 core-bound survivors, 1 fisher, 2 fighters, and that the binding on the fisher was done at the moment her own core was at the cracking point, and that the binding on the fighters was done by capturing tags from a subordinate owner's island after the subordinate's island was absorbed, and that the absorption itself was done through the standard conquest interface with the absorb option selected over bind, and that the handle has been watching the southwest quadrant for 2 days through standard market channels and would be willing, the handle writes, to submit a more detailed description of the absorption pattern for the listed bounty if the basalt flag would clarify whether one description is sufficient or whether sequential descriptions can be built separately. The handle goes by Lim Dae-yun. That basalt flag replies inside the same breath. Sequential descriptions, the basalt flag writes, can be billed separately. First submission, the basalt flag writes, accepted under public terms. Bounty paid on verification. Lim Dae-hyun replies, single line, that the first submission will be delivered through verified market channel inside the next tide cycle. The chat panel goes quiet, as the chat has just watched a market trade close on the absorption pattern of my coral, which means a chat handle I have never met has been watching my last 2 days closely enough to write a report on them, and which means whatever Lim Dae-hyun is going to submit inside the next tide cycle is going to be accurate enough that Seokjin's next move is going to be built on it. I read the bounty number once. Then I read Lim Dae-hyun's first reply once. So I read the basalt flag's confirmation that sequential descriptions can be built separately. A market that has just opened a sequential price on the secret of your work gives you until the next tide cycle to change the secret. Soy is looking at me across the basin lid. Hurin is on the medicine shelf, hands still, antidote drop suspended above the jar she was about to seal. Doha has not put down the plank he was about to add to the pile. Kimbora has the second drying rack tray in mid-turn. 4 anchors, 4 breathing rates, all 4 breathing at the same pace for the first time since I bound any of them. Tide turns once over the reef edge in the silence the chat just made. The next tide changes in 5 hours, 47 minutes, and a chat handle named Lim Dae-hyun, who's been watching my coral through standard market channels for 2 days, is going to deliver the first sequential description of my absorption pattern to Ma Seok-jin's flag inside it. 5 hours, 47 minutes is the kind of count a dockboard would write on a slate in chalk and tell a crew not to waste. I do not waste it on the chat panel. The bounty post closes first under my hand. Below the closed window, chat keeps moving how a market keeps moving under a counter you have walked away from. But my panel under my sternum reads the numbers I actually need. And the numbers I actually need are the 4 anchors at the basin lid, and the report selector at my left, and the trade extraction queue at my right. Soy crosses from the seaward edge with her spear at her shoulder, not lowered. Harin sets the antidote drop in the jar without spilling it. Doha puts the plank on the pile slowly enough that the pile does not shift. Kimbora finishes turning the tray and sets her hand on the rack edge. 4 anchors at the basin lid, 4 breathing rates settling into one pace, all 4 looking at me since the Vaughn told them, before I could say a word, what the chat panel had just put on the table. I tell Soye indirect, saying that we are not going to bed tonight. She tells me, indirect back, that she had not planned to. Lim Dae-hyun's first submission is going to be accurate because 2 days of watching is 2 days of watching. The fix is not to disprove what he has seen. My fix is to make the pattern he is going to sell, not be the pattern that is sitting under my sternum 5 hours from now. I open the Coral Devour core panel. The panel reads the way it has read since Park Guntae went into it. Absorb selected on Guntae, bind selected on Soy and Harin, tags captured on Doha and Kimbora. The pattern, written out, is exactly what Dae-hyun has been watching. Owners cracking at fracture lines, the bind option taken at the cracking point, the absorb option taken when the owner is too dangerous to keep, tags captured during the absorb window. 4 lines on the bond, 3 core-bound survivors, 1 absorption. I tap into the Coral Devour Core's sub-options how you tap into a panel you have not used yet. The sub-options open under the main 4. Absorb, link, extract, dissolve. Under absorb there is a smaller line I have not read before, and the smaller line says absorb sequence, currently set to default, which is the sequence Daehyun has been watching. Inside that smaller line there are 4 subsequences, labeled A through D, and each one reorders the way the conquest interface presents its options when a defeated owner's core opens. Sequence A is default, bind first, then absorb. Subordinates tags capturable inside a 5-second collapse window. Sequence B reorders to absorb first, bind second, with tag capture moved to a pre-absorb window of 3 seconds. Below B, sequence C splits the absorb into a 2-stage process, where the core is first dissolved into coral material, and then the trade is extracted from the material rather than the core. After C, sequence D runs the bind on the defeated owner first, then runs an absorb on the bound owner's island instead of the owner's core, leaving the core bound but the island absorbed as territory, which is a pattern the panel labels as bind plus island absorb. That last option reads how a knot I have not tied before reads when I look at it laid flat on a dock. I have not seen another owner do this because most owners do not have a coral with a devour core, and most owners with a devour core do not have a trade extraction queue open. The panel had been waiting for me to look at it. I tap sequence D, the panel confirms. Default absorb sequence overwritten, new sequence D active. Estimated coral energy cost per conquest, 15% higher than default, because the bind and the island absorb are running on the same window. The trade is that the pattern Daehyun is selling Seokjin in 5 hours is no longer the pattern that is going to happen the next time someone comes over my coral lip. I close the sub options. 5 hours, 40 minutes by the count under my sternum. The morning reef report selector is still open at my left. A half-range circle holds the 2 pings from earlier, plus a third one that has come in inside the time the bounty post took to close. That third ping is owned, north-northeast, moving toward my coral. Its color is the yellow of an independent owner, not a Seokjin subordinate. Yellow is also flashing the way it flashes when an owner is moving on raid anchor and not on drift. I select the third ping. Report cost runs higher than yesterday since my panel knows the owner is moving on raid anchor. Coral energy ticks down 2 more percentage points. The panel pings inside 90 seconds. Owner, Oh Yesul. Island trait, Iron Palm Beach. Status, independent but desperate. Danger, high and close combat. Resources, Iron Palm Wood, Spearstone, training posts. Conquest condition, defeat owner and island challenge or break her command post. Warning, she attacks small owners before slave docks can take them. Time to landing, 4 hours, 11 minutes. Raid party, 6 fighters plus owner. Approach vector north-northeast with shell raft escort and a single command raft of the same hardwood. The report closes. 4 hours, 11 minutes is sooner than 5 hours. 40 minutes, which means the next person to come over my coral lip is going to come over it before Lim Daeyoon's first submission lands at Seokjin's flag. If the next person comes over the lip and goes down by sequence D, then the pattern in Daehyun's submission becomes a pattern about my last conquest, not my next one. Daehyun will know that. He is the kind of handle that bills sequentially because he knows the second submission will be worth more than the first. That is a fine, not a fix. The fix is to make the second submission also wrong by the time he writes it. I tap the Coral Devour Core panel a second time, drop back into Absorb Sequence, and tap Sequence D in such a way that the panel marks it as variable. Variable Sequence, my panel calls it, an option I had not seen because the option only opens once another sequence is active, and a second conquest is on the radar. It runs a different subsequence per conquest, drawing from B, C, and D in rotation. Default A stays out of rotation because Default A is the pattern Daehyun is already selling. Variable Sequence confirmed. Estimated coral energy cost, an additional 8% per conquest on top of the chosen subsequence's base cost. Higher than I want, lower than the cost of having a public flag read your work. I close the panel. Soye is at my elbow since the bond told her I had been inside my panel for longer than I usually am. Haran is at the medicine shelf with the second batch of antidote drops cooling. Doha is on the seaward edge now. Kim Bora has set up the tray of dried minnows how Soye told her to set it up an hour ago. I tell Soye, indirect, that an independent warrior owner named Oh Yesul lands in 4 hours, 11 minutes, with 6 fighters in a heavy command raft, and that she is coming in on raid anchor, which means her command post is on the raft and not on her island, which means the conquest condition is breaking the post and not crossing to the island. The report has Yesul listed as a person who attacks small owners before slave docks can take them, which means she is going to come at my coral fast because she thinks fast is the only edge she has. Soye tells me, indirect, saying that she will hold the seaward edge again, and that Haran should be on the medicine shelf, and that Doha and Kim Bora should pre-stage red shell traps below the tide line on the north-northeast lip, because that is where a raid anchor on Yesul's vector lands. She adds, indirect, that the bait gate should be open and that the silver shoal should be moved to the north-northeast pool, because fish blood on the surf line splits a 6-fighter team faster than coral teeth do. I tell her, indirect, saying that she is right and that she should run it. Soye runs it. Doha and Kim Bora go to the north-northeast lip with crab shells and red shell traps. Haran sets the numbing paste on a small tray and brings it to the medicine shelf and stacks 2 jars of antidote drops next to it, because a numb arm and a poison wound are not the same problem. Soye opens the bait gate and herds the silver shoal toward the north-northeast pool with her hands, which is what a silverfish shoal owner does when she is paying attention to her trait the way other people pay attention to the weather. I take the broken raft off the dry side and drag it back to the north-northeast lip as a footboard the wrong woman is going to step on. 3 hours, 55 minutes. I drink the kind of water you drink when you are not thirsty but you know you will not get a chance to drink in the next 4 hours. Hareen sees me drink and walks the basin lid to bring me a strip of dried blood crab meat. I take the strip without saying anything direct and chew it slowly while the bone teeth along the north-northeast lip get one last check. 3 hours, 26 minutes. The chat panel pings once. Header line, Lim Daehyun single message private. Daehyun's private message is short. He writes, indirect, that he has noted my absorption pattern under the default sequence, and that he is delivering the description to the basalt flag inside the tide cycle, and that he is also noting, separately, that the coral has just paid coral energy on a subsequence change inside the last 20 minutes, and that the subsequence change is visible at his end because basic market channels track coral energy reads. Daehyun continues that the change does not affect his first submission, and that the change will affect his second submission, and that he is, separately, willing to delay the second submission for a counteroffer that my coral owner can post through the same market channel. I close the message without replying. A man who tells you about the leak he has already started, before you have asked, is a man whose leak is what he is selling next, not what he is selling now. 2 hours, 48 minutes. Soye is on the seaward edge with both spears now, the longer at her shoulder and the shorter laid on the lip beside her boot. How somebody who has trained on a fishing skiff holds 2 spears when the second one is for throwing. Harren has rolled the medicine shelf under the dry overhang of the basin and weighted it with 2 stones. Doha has finished the red shell trap line below the tide on the north-northeast lip. Kimbora is on the bait gate with Soy's old fish blood pail and a wooden ladle. I walk the whole coral once more. Coral teeth doubled. Red shell traps, 3 pockets. Bone tooth line along the lip. Broken raft pinned at the north-northeast as a footboard. Mangrove knife root, fresh as of yesterday, running along the seaward lip in a thin green line that the coral-based panel labels as active. Anchor spikes, none yet, because the shellback bastion blueprint is still inside a monster island that I have not raided. That is a problem I will fix after Yesul. 2 hours, 11 minutes. The horizon on the north-northeast lifts an iron palm raft into the bar of pale that is becoming sunrise. It sits on the water lower than a shell raft does because iron palm wood is heavier than driftwood. 6 fighters move on it the way 6 fighters move when their owner has trained them to move on a raft instead of an island. Oh Yesul is the 7th, standing at the front with a spear that the report had not listed as ordinary, and a smaller hardwood post behind her that the panel under my sternum reads, the moment it comes inside scan range, as her command post. I tell Soye indirect, saying that her command post is the iron palm post at the back of the raft. Soye tells me, indirect, that she will throw the second spear at the post first if the conquest panel asks for it. I tell her, indirect, saying that the conquest panel asks for it. She nods once. 1 hour, 28 minutes by the count, except the count has stopped mattering, since the raft is now inside the range where coral teeth start humming under my sternum. Yesul calls across the water. The call is not loud. It is the kind of call an owner makes when she has been on raid for the 3rd week in a row, and the call is conserving the breath for the fight. She tells me, indirect from where I am reading it, that she has been moving toward the southwest quadrant for 2 days because the slave dock fleet's route map crosses my coral inside the next tide cycle, and that she would rather absorb a coral that is going to be branded by Sokjin than let a coral that has bound 2 female owners be branded by Sokjin without doing anything about it. Soye on the seaward edge has heard the call. Soye's grip on the longer spear does not change. Yesul calls again, indirect, that she does not want a duel and that she does not want a market conversation, and that she wants the coral and the traits because she has run the math on her iron palm beach against the slave dock fleet, and the math reads that her beach loses unless it has a devour core under it. I tell her, indirect across the water, that the math runs the other way. Reading the bond aloud through my panel, I add that my coral has been carrying 4 anchors for 2 days, and that the carrying has not gotten lighter, and that I am not handing the carry to a warrior who has run her own math at the back of the heavy command raft. Yesul does not call again. Her raft swings around the seaward edge the way an iron palm raft swings when its owner has decided the conversation is over. The raft lands on the north-northeast lip is the only landing point a raid anchor on her vector can take. Iron palm wood hits the broken raft I had pinned at the lip. 2 of her fighters step off onto the broken raft, because 2 fighters always step off first on a landing. The broken raft pulls both fine knots the moment the second fighter steps on the second plank. Both fighters go over the side onto the bone tooth line. The bone tooth line catches the first one across the shin and the second one across the calf. Neither of them goes down all the way because Yesul's fighters are trained to keep their feet on a hit, but neither of them is moving up the coral how a fighter is supposed to move up a coral lip on a raid. Yasul does not look at the two fighters. She steps off the raft herself onto the lip directly, skipping the broken raft because she has watched the broken raft go. The remaining 4 fighters spread out the way a 6-fighter team spreads out when 2 are down. 2 go to the north pocket, 2 go to the south pocket. Both pockets have red shell traps. The north pocket trap takes the first fighter across the ankle. A south pocket trap takes the third fighter across the heel. Fighter 4, paying attention, steps around the south pocket and onto the bone tooth line. 3 of her 6 fighters are wounded inside the first 30 seconds of landing. Kim Bora at the bait gate ladles the first pail of fish blood onto the north-northeast surf, and the silver shoal under Soye's trait reads the blood and turns into the surf, how a silver fish shoal turns when its owner has invited it. The wounded fighters on the bone tooth line are not in the water. Blood pulls smaller predators against the surf line. 2 fighters at the north pocket and the south pocket are waiting. One of them is not waiting anymore. He has gone backward over the lip onto the bone tooth line because the silver shoal has shoved the smaller predators up against his ankles. 4 of her 6 fighters are out of the line inside the first minute. Yasul is still moving. She moves the way the report said she moves. Fast and close range. Spear forward, weight low, no wasted step. She comes up the lip past Doha because Doha was set on the south side and her vector is north, and she comes around the bone tooth line because she has watched the bone tooth line take her men. Soye throws the second spear. The throw is the kind of throw a fisher makes when she has been on a fishing skiff long enough to know how a spear flies over wet wood. Her spear hits the iron palm command post low on the front face. The hardwood takes the spear, holds it, does not break. A conquest panel under my sternum pings since the throw is registered as an attack on the command post. Soye throws her longer spear next. The longer spear hits the post on the same low front face 2 finger widths above the first spear. Hardwood takes the second spear, holds it, but the panel marks the post as compromised. Yasul is on the dry side of my coral now, and she has seen Soye throw both spears. She runs at Soye. Heron from the medicine shelf has come out with the numbing paste tray. She is not a fighter and she is not pretending to be. Her hands throw the tray. The tray hits Yasul's spear shaft 3 finger widths from Yasul's grip. Numbing paste smears onto the spear shaft and onto 2 of Yasul's fingers. Yasul does not drop the spear. Her grip changes because the paste is doing what paste does. The change in grip is what Soye needed. Soye closes the gap with the shorter spear she had laid on the lip. I am on the dry side already, behind Yasul, between Yasul and the command post. The conquest interface opens under my sternum, since my panel has read all of this and is asking what it is supposed to ask. It lays the conquest condition in a single line: break command post or defeat owner. The panel has flagged the post as compromised and is reading the conquest as inside the window. If the post takes 1 more hit, I do not break the post. Instead, my hand hooks Yasul's spear with a length of vine rope I had set on the dry side an hour ago for exactly this. The vine rope catches the spear shaft at the numbing paste. Yasul's grip slips because the paste has finished doing what paste does. The spear goes a hand width forward of where she meant it to go, which is the hand width Soye needs to put the shorter spear into a coral root snare that the mangrove knife root has grown along the dry side overnight. Yasul goes into the snare with the spear. The mangrove root closes how the system labels it as designed to close. Not tight enough to break a leg, tight enough that the leg does not move. Yasul does not yell. She tells me, indirect, saying that her command post is 1 hit away and that she will not give me the satisfaction of running her math out loud for me. I do not give her the satisfaction of running it either. Soye walks past Yasul with the shorter spear at her shoulder, walks past the command post, sets the shorter spear into the post on the same low front face the first 2 spears hit. The post cracks across the front. The conquest panel pings. Her command raft drifts the smallest finger width seaward since the command post on a raid anchor is the thing that holds the raft on the lip. Command post broken. Conquest condition met. The interface opens the next layer of options under my sternum. Yasul's core reads at fracture point, but not at the fracture point Haran's was at. Hers is at 68% fracture and holding, which is the kind of fracture a warrior runs because warriors run their cores closer to the edge as a habit. Break core, absorb core, bind core. I have set the coral devour core to variable sequence. The panel runs the sequence selection on its own. Sequence D opens. Bind plus island absorb. I tap bind core first. The interface confirms. Yasul's fracture stops at 68%, the way Heron stopped at 57%. The fracture lines close how a crack in a hole closes when the hole is dragged out of the water. A second window holds open on the interface. Island absorb. I tap. The panel asks me to confirm because absorbing Yasul's island while she is bound is what Sequence D does, and is also what most owners do not do because most owners do not have a coral devour core with a trait extraction queue running underneath. I confirm. Iron Palm Beach absorbs. The trait moves into the trait extraction queue. Yasul's island, the actual island, 68 kilometers north-northeast on her raid anchor vector. The iron palm groves and the spearstone quarry and the training posts and the seaward bench dissolves into coral material the way Park Gunte's mangrove did when I absorbed him. Resources transfer. Iron palm wood, 3,000 kilograms. Spearstone, 600 kilograms. Training posts, 12, intact. Iron Palm Beach trait slotted under Soy's silver fish shoal and Haren's green spring herbed soil at the panel. Coral-based panel ticks. Iron palm posts grow along the dry side of the coral in 12 neat positions, where the training posts had been. Spear racks rise next to the base and lid because my panel is reading the spear stone and laying it where Yesul's trait is telling it to lay. A tougher landing beach forms along the north-northeast lip where the broken raft had been. The bone-tooth line stays. Mangrove root snare stays. Coral teeth, doubled, stay. New layer of iron palm beach sand laid under the bone-tooth line and the snare. Coral base, the panel writes, holding it base tier, pending one more island trait of fortress grade for the next promotion. The trait extraction queue closes one of its 2 open slots. 1 slot remains. Yesul is in the snare still because sequence D does not release the snare automatically. I tell the snare, indirect through my coral, to release. The mangrove root opens. Yesul steps out of the snare. She does not pick up the spear. Her voice comes flat and indirect, telling me that her island is gone, and that she is bound, and that she is not going to apologize for the call she made across the water since the call was the correct call given the math she had. I tell her, indirect, that I did not ask for the apology, and that the math she had was the math of a warrior who had not factored to devour core, and that the math I have now is the math of a coral that has just absorbed an iron palm beach, and that the math says she trains the defense. Yesul looks at me without saying anything indirect for the time it takes the surf to turn once. Then she tells me, indirect, saying that she will train the defense and that her 4 standing fighters are bound under her tags and that her 2 wounded are also bound under her tags and that she would like the wounded looked at first because that is what an owner does for her people whether or not the owner is still an owner. I tell her, indirect, that Haren is on the medicine shelf. Haren is already at the bone tooth line with the numbing paste tray and a fresh jar of antidote drops. The 2 wounded on the bone tooth line are on their backs. 2 more wounded in the pockets are sitting up. Harin works without looking up at any of us. She tells the wounded, indirect, to hold still and to not pull the shells out of their wounds, because the shells are doing the work my panel needs them to do, until she gets the paste on. 6 new bonds run into the coral, how Doha's and Kimbora's bonds ran in. Low rank, low draw, but new mouths at the basin lid. 10 anchors now. 4 core bound, 6 low rank. The bond hum under my sternum is louder by 1/3 than it was at sunrise. Yesul tells me, indirect, saying that I am going to need a fortress trig inside the next tide cycle because Sopjin's slave dock fleet, not the raid skiff she heard about, the actual fleet with chained boats and core branding hooks and slave collars and monster bone rams, is moving on a route that crosses my coral inside 3 tide cycles, and my coral I have now will not survive it. The chat panel pings again. Header line, Lim Daehyun, single message, private. Daehyun writes, indirect, that he has noted the conquest of Oyesul under a non-default sequence, and that he is updating his second submission accordingly, Separately, noting that the slave dock fleet has moved 1 tide cycle earlier than its filed route, and that the fleet is now expected at my coral inside 2 tide cycles, not 3, and that the early move is consistent with Ma Sokjin's habit when a bounty is in play, of accelerating the original plan to land before the bounty's information arrives. I close the message. Yesul is watching me read the chat panel. She tells me, indirect, saying that she has heard the name Lim Daehyun before in market channels, and that he is the kind of handle that sells the same information twice, once to each side, and that I should not be reading his messages closely because he writes them to be read closely. I tell her, indirect, that I am reading them once and then closing them. She tells me, indirect, saying that once is 1 time too many for that handle but that she will not argue the point. Soye is back on the seaward edge with the shorter spear in her left hand, and her own longer spear, which Doha has retrieved from the broken command post, in her right. Haren is at the bone tooth line dressing the last of the 6 wounds. Doha is dragging the captured raft up onto the dry side, because a command raft of that hardwood is 1,200 kilograms of usable wood. Kimbora has gone back to the second drying rack and started turning trays because Kimbora is the kind of bound survivor who finishes the tray she was on before she does anything else. 10 anchors, 4 core bound, 6 low rank, coral base holding at base tier pending a fortress trait, slave dock fleet inside 2 tide cycles, variable sequence active, Lim Daehyun's second submission already being written. The selector for the next morning reef report is open under my sternum. A half-range circle holds the unowned eastward ping I have been planning to take, plus a new one that the panel has surfaced since my panel knows the deep scan cost is going to be the only fortress trait option I have. Inside 2 tide cycles, that new ping reads North, Mid-Range, Monster Island, Fortress Grade. The panel labels it Shellback Bastion Island, unowned, danger high, blueprint listed at Coral Wall Bastion, hidden chest listed under Golem Nest. Warning boss wakes if all shield crabs die. Deep scan cost is listed. Island coins, 600. Coral energy, 12%. Food, 2 trays of dried blood crab. I have all 3. Before tapping the selector, I tell Yesul, indirect, that her first job is to walk the coral and tell me where the iron palm posts go up first, and which of the 6 low ranks she trusts on the seaward bench at sunrise, and how she trains a defense in a tide cycle. Yasuo tells me, indirect, saying that she will walk it. I tap the deep scan selector. The panel confirms. Deep scan target Shellback Bastion Island. Report delivers at sunrise inside 3 hours. Coral energy ticks down 12% in the same breath. The 2 trays of dried blood crab disappear from the panel into the deep scan ledger. 600 island coins move out of the market account into the system's intel ledger. Coral Devour core capacity reads at 22% under current upkeep. That is low, the lowest it has been since my coral grew past the platform. I close my panel. Sunrise hits the seaward edge as a flat line of pale across the surf. Soy on the edge has not turned. The shoal under her trait is moving in lazy figure eights inside the bait gate because the silver shoal does that when its owner has lowered her shoulders for the first time in 12 hours. Haran has finished the last of the wound dressings and is walking back to the medicine shelf with her hands sticky. Doha has the captured raft pulled up to the dry side and is starting to break it down with the rusty knife. Kimbora has the second drying rack 2 trays ahead of where it was at midnight. Yesul has started walking the coral. She walks it the way a warrior walks a beach for the first time. Her boots stop at the bone tooth line and she reads it. At the mangrove root snare, she stops again and tests it with her hand. 3 steps later, she walks to the iron palm posts that have grown along the dry side and lays her palm on the first one and reads it how an owner reads a piece of her own island that has been moved without her. That post does not change colors under her hand. Her bond, however, drops one of its sharper edges. Not warmth, nothing close yet, a small drop. The chat panel scrolls under my closed window. That bounty post is still pinned at the top. Daeyeon's first submission has not landed yet. The basalt flag has not posted again. Under the bounty thread, a smaller handle is wondering aloud where Lim Daehyun's tide cycle forecasts are sourced from, since the forecasts run a half cycle ahead of every public market reader and read the way a panel reads when its owner is sitting above a trench instead of an island. 2 tide cycles by the panel's current count. Soy on the seaward edge turns her head toward me for the first time since sunrise. She tells me, indirect, that the deep scan ping is going to need a raid party and that she will run the seaward edge for the time I am gone, and that Yasul should be on the dry side as the defense lead in my absence, and that Haran should keep the medicine shelf running, and that Doha and Kimbora should not be on the seaward edge alone, given Sokjin's fleet is now inside 2 tide cycles. Yasul, who has walked back to where Soy is standing, tells Soy indirect, saying that she has heard the assignment and that she will hold the dry side as the defense lead. The 2 of them do not look at each other for long. My bond reads both of them inside the same hum. I tell them, indirect, that the deep scan delivers at sunrise tomorrow and that I leave for the Bastion the same morning. 3 hours later, the deep scan delivers. Report opens under my sternum at full sunrise. Shellback Bastion Island. Unowned. Danger high. Monsters listed. Shellback boars in 3 groups of 4. Shield crabs in tide pools along the southern shelf. Stone barnacle golem in a nest at the center, under a layer of hardened reef shell. Resources. Hard shell plates. Stone coral. Fortress moss. Blueprint listed. Coral wall bastion. Anchor spike recipe listed under the same chest. Hidden chest under the golem nest, accessed by a tide crack on the southwest face of the central mound. Warning, boss wakes if all shield crabs die. Best landing, southwest face 20 meters from the tide crack. Estimated clear, 6 hours given precise routing and avoidance of mass shield crab killing. A second warning runs along the bottom of the report. Other intel signatures detected on Shellback Bastion Island. 2 raid parties not flagged as owners. Bounty hunter ranks. Approach vector southeast. Estimated arrival inside the same 6-hour window I have for the clear. Sokjin's bounty has already pulled hunters onto my route. 2 unscheduled crews have shown up on the same shift. I do not stop the shift. I let the unscheduled crews think they are the ones working and I finish my own work behind them while they wake whatever they are going to wake. I tell Soy, indirect, saying that I take the shell raft and the bone sailboat half-built rig and that I will be back inside 7 hours with a fortress trait or I will not be back. Soy tells me, indirect, saying that neither do I. The bone sailboat is not finished. Its frame is laid, the sail weed is cured, the bone hooks are tied along the runner. What it does not have is the deck planking. I take the unfinished frame with me, since the frame floats and the frame is faster than the shell raft. The shell raft I bring as a backup because a one-man crossing to a high-danger monster island wants a backup hull. I leave my coral at full sunrise. Yasul stands on the dry side with the iron palm post behind her, and the 4 standing fighters of her old team and the 2 who have come off the bone tooth line and can stand again. She does not look at me when I push off. Her eyes are reading the seaward horizon the way a beach defender reads a horizon for the first time. Soy on the seaward edge has the shorter spear in her left hand, and Yasul's recovered spear in her right. Harin at the medicine shelf is restocking the numbing paste, because Harin reads my panel, and the panel says I will be back wounded. The crossing to Shellback Bastion Island takes 3 hours. That bone sail frame, even half finished, moves on the water how a real boat moves. Not fast. Faster than the shell raft would have moved. I row the second hour since the bone hooks along the runner, snag the surf and slow the frame. But the snagging also keeps the frame on a heading the surf would have pushed off. Southwest face of Shellback Bastion Island lifts out of the surf at the second sunrise hour mark. The island is bigger than the deep scan report had implied. Stone coral mounds and 3 rings around a central mound. The central mound has the hardened reef shell layer the report mentioned. Tide pools along the southern shelf are visible from the water. Shield crabs in the pools are moving in slow circles the way shield crabs move when they have been the only thing on an island for long enough that nothing has bothered them. I land at the southwest face 20 meters from the tide crack the report had marked. The shell raft I tie to a stone coral mound on the lip. My bone sail frame I beach next to it with the rusty knife stuck in the sand as a marker because the sand on Shellback Bastion is a slightly different shade of brown than the sand on my coral, and the rusty knife is the most visible thing I have. I take the spear stone-tipped spear Yasu's training post had laid into the coral panel for me. The spear is heavier than my old driftwood spear. That weight is the kind a fisher learns to read inside a single throw, which is enough. I take the bone hook rod with the silver minnow line wound around its grip, then a small bundle of crab shell pieces and a coil of vine rope. Nobody else comes with me, not Soy or Heron or Yasul, or any of the low ranks since the report had said precise, clear, and precise is not 6 people stepping on a tide pool together. The first ring of stone coral mounds I cross by walking along the lip, rather than across the mounds, because the lip does not have shield crabs and the mounds do. Shield crabs do not chase, they sit and they hold. I am not interested in waking them. The southern shelf is where the report said it would be. I fish the shield crabs. That is the line the report had been pointing toward, and that is the line that works. The bone hook rod with the silver minnow line is the rod a fisher uses for medium catch in tide pools. I bait the hook with a piece of crab shell. Shield crabs are slow, but they are not stupid. The third one I bait takes the hook since the bait is bigger than what the shield crab is used to seeing. I pull. The shield crab comes out of the pool how a thing comes out of a pool when it has not had a thing pull it out before. I land the crab on the lip. One shell plate pries off the back clean. The plate comes off clean because shield crab shells are layered the way the report said they were. I do this 6 times. 6 shell plates is enough for what the chest will need me to do. I do not fish the rest of the shield crabs because the report had said the boss wakes if all shield crabs die. 6 out of however many is not all. I move to the central mound. The hardened reef shell layer over the central mound is thicker than I want. A tide crack on the southwest face is the access point the report had pointed me toward. Its mouth is narrow enough that a man my size can fit if he goes through sideways and slowly. I go through sideways and slowly. The chest is inside the central mound under the golem nest. Above it, stone barnacle golem sits on the surface of the mound. Between me and the chest is about 3 meters of crawl space. Dark crawl space. My bone sail frame's marker rusty knife is 50 meters behind me and I can see it through the crack since the angle works. I crawl. The golem above the nest does not move. According to the deep scan, the golem wakes if all shield crabs die. 6 shield crabs out of a colony is not all the shield crabs dying. The chest is where the report said it would be. Hardwood banded with old bronze, lid not locked because a chest under a stone golem nest does not need to be locked. I open the chest. Coral wall bastion blueprint. On top single sheet, sealed in waxed paper. Anchor spike recipe. Under the blueprint, single sheet, also waxed. Under both, 6 small pearls and a coil of fortress moss thread. I take everything, then I crawl back through the crack how I came in. The first sound I hear on the lip outside the crack is not a sound I made. 2 boats are coming in on the southeast face, both shell rafts, 6 men between them, spearstone tips on every spear, coral hunters, the kind of small operator who answers a basalt flag's open bounty inside the first hour. They have not seen me yet, because the central mound is between us. Their voices carry, indirect across the water, about how a bounty pays better if you bring my coral owner's head along with the description. I do not move. The hunters land on the southeast face. They walk up the lip. Their crew crosses the first ring of stone coral mounds without walking the lip the way I walked it, because they are in a hurry, and they step on 3 mounds in the first 30 steps. The first mound holds. A second mound holds, but the third mound has a shield crab tucked into it that I had not fished since the mound was not on the lip. That shield crab moves. A boot lands. The crab dies. Across the southern shelf, 2 more shield crabs in the tide pools react to the death of the third, because shield crabs in a colony track each other through the layered shells. The 2 crabs in the tide pools come up out of the water at the hunters. Their 6-man line splits. 2 go after the tide pool crabs. The 2 crabs hold up the 2 hunters for the time it takes for the colony to read the death of the third crab and react in full. I count the shield crabs the hunters kill while they fight. 2 in the tide pools. 1 in a third mound a hunter steps on while backing up. 2 more in a 4th and 5th mound the hunters did not see. The colony total drops faster than I had planned. I hear the stone barnacle golem wake. The wake is not loud. Its grinding sound is the kind a stone makes when a stone has been a stone for long enough that moving is the unusual thing. Hardened reef shell layer over the central mound cracks along the seams. Fragments fall on the lip on the southwest side, 2 meters from the tide crack I came out of. I am still on the lip. The golem comes up out of the central mound with the slow, stupid speed of a thing that has not been awake in a long time. It is taller than 3 of me stacked. Its weak joint, the report had said, is the inner ankle of the left rear leg, because the inner ankle is the place where the barnacle plates have not finished growing over the original reef stone. The hunters see the golem. Then they do what hunters who have just woken a boss do, which is point at each other and stop being a 6-man team. I move. My route puts the central mound between me and the golem, since the central mound is the only thing on the island that is bigger than the golem. Off my belt comes the coil of vine rope. 2 arm lengths uncoil into my hand. Then the bone hook rod off my shoulder. The hunters are now backing toward the southeast face. 2 of them are running. The golem turns toward the running hunters because the running hunters are louder than I am. I move along the lip toward the inner ankle of the left rear leg. The bone hook rod, baited with the largest piece of crab shell I had taken from the southern shelf, swings once. My hook lands in the inner ankle joint. Vine rope, tied to the rod's grip end, pays out as the hook lands. I tie the other end of the vine rope around a stone coral mound on the lip. Then I run. The golem follows the running hunters down the southeast face of the central mound. Its inner ankle joint, hooked, holds for 1 step. Vine rope catches. A rope is not strong enough to stop a golem, but it is strong enough to redirect a step by the small fraction of a degree that a step on the inner ankle of the left rear leg redirects when the joint catches. That step lands 6 inches inboard of where it had been planning to land. 6 inches inboard is the tide crack. The golem's left rear leg goes into the tide crack. A tide crack is narrow at the top and wider at the bottom, because that is what tide cracks are. Its leg goes into the inner knee. Stone weight, which had been moving forward on the step, does not have a place to go. Forward into the tide crack the golem topples. Head first, since the head was already leading the step. That crack swallows the golem to the shoulders. The golem is not dead. A tide crack is not deep enough to drown a stone barnacle golem, but it is deep enough that the golem cannot get the left rear leg back out of the inner knee position. Pinned head down, the thing is also not in a position to swing at anything. I walk past the golem to the southeast face. The 2 hunters who had not run are looking at the golem. Their crewmates who had run are at the shell rafts already and pushing off. Both of the men left on the lip see me. I tell them, indirect, that they have a choice. They do not call back. I tell them indirect, saying that the choice is to push off after their crew, or to stay on the island with the golem they woke. The first hunter pushes off after his crew. His partner stays for 2 more breaths and then pushes off because 2 more breaths is the time it takes to read the inner ankle of the golem and decide the inner ankle is not a fight he wants without a 6-man team. Both shell rafts go southeast on the surf. I am alone on Shellback Bastion Island with the chest's contents, 6 shield crab plates, the golem in the crack, and the conquest interface that has just opened under my sternum because my panel reads the island is cleared except for the golem and the golem is not in a position to defend its core. The core of Shellback Bastion is in the central mound under where the golem had been sleeping. My panel reads it as unowned, vulnerable, available for absorb. I tap absorb. The panel runs the absorb. Resources inside the claim circle transfer. Hard shell plates, 300. Stone coral, 400 kilograms. Fortress moss, 18 squares. Spearstone, 80 kilograms. Shellback Bastion's island core, dissolved into coral material. Fed to my Devour core. The Coral Wall Bastion blueprint, already inside my inventory from the chest, activates against the absorbed island. Coral Base panel ticks. In the next breath, the panel writes that Coral Base is promoted to Reef Fortress. The bond hum under my sternum does the thing it had not done since I woke on the coral. It changes pitch, not louder, lower. Coral walls rise along the seaward edge of my coral, 60 kilometers south-southwest of where I am standing. The Coral Base panel reads them coming up since my panel reads them coming up. Coral walls along the seaward edge, 1 meter, 2 meters, the wall reaching its full standing height of 3 meters at the high tide line. Anchor spikes, 6 of them, lock into the seabed along my coral's drift path, because anchor spikes are what the anchor spike recipe makes, and the recipe activated against the absorbed island how the blueprint did. Fortress moss grows along the basin lid, because fortress moss protects food stores from rot and the panel knows the basin lid is where the food stores are. Reef Fortress, my panel writes, holding it fortress tier, pending 1 more island trait of high grade for the next promotion. I close the panel. The golem in the crack has gone quiet because golems whose heads are pinned go quiet eventually. Hunter's shell rafts are dots on the southeast horizon. I gather the rest of the resources inside the claim circle. The shield crab plates, the fortress moss, the spearstone, the chest itself, which is good banded hardwood. My bone sail frame on a southwest face I rig now because the frame is finished enough to take the load. Residual energy from the Coral Wall Bastion blueprint I leave in the bone sail frame as ballast, since my panel has read it as a structural reinforcement, and that is what a half-finished hull needs. I push off from the southwest face at hour 5 of the 6-hour clear window. The crossing back takes 2 hours because the bone sail frame is loaded with 300 kilograms more than it was on the crossing out. And since the wind has shifted east-southeast, which is not the heading I want, I read the chat panel on the crossing. Lim Dae-hyun has not posted his second submission yet. The basalt flag is not posted again. That bounty is still pinned at the top. A second pinned post has gone up under the bounty in the time I was on Shellback Bastion. The new pinned post is from a market lieutenant, not Seokin himself, and the post lists the slave dock fleet's revised route map at the bottom of the post in small bright font. That fleet's revised arrival at my coral reads at 1 tide cycle, 20 minutes. My crossing back will not deliver me inside 1 tide cycle. It will deliver me inside 2 hours of the fleet's arrival. 2 hours is enough. The coral lifts out of the surf at the second crossing hour mark. Seaward walls are 3 meters tall and standing where the panel said they would. Anchor spikes set into the seabed below the seaward edge are catching the surf the way anchor spikes catch the surf, which is by being there. The basin lid is fortress moss green. Bone tooth line and the mangrove root snare and the iron palm posts are where I left them. Soy is on the seaward wall, not the edge, the wall.